Generally, you said feminists was
here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
Money. I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
the deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we can still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideology is the main tenet of politics, right? This is my ideology.
Yeah, but...
So, 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate...
Cool. Robert. Oh, that? With a crowbar, you said?
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah, the Raging Tomato. We are trying again once more on this new Seriously Saturday series where we can actually get through the conversation, hopefully without yelling and screaming. And I'm really excited for it. This evening, I've got Gnostic Informant, our featured guest, Admiral Gibbs, Uncle Doug, Hunter Kozak, and of course, Benjamin Balderson, here to have a really great discussion and bring forth to you their information, knowledge, and wisdom from all over the world. The prompt of this evening is: the Bible is fabricated history that does not map onto reality. Gnostic, I'd like you to go ahead and give us a go on your opening thoughts, please.
All right. Thanks for having me on. And this is one of my favorite topics, by the way. The Bible, I'm talking about the whole Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, Hebrew Bible, New Testament, is fabricated for the most part. Now, there are instances where it draws from actual history. I'm not denying that Israel didn't exist and the kings of Israel didn't exist. There's plenty of inscriptions and corroborating evidence and other primary sources from like the Assyrians, for example, that mention people like Hezekiah, Omri. There's even a mention of House of David. So that's fine. But what I'm talking about is the major roots of the entire Bible, which is the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses. I mean, we're talking. I'm not even talking about the miracles or the talking snakes or the talking donkeys. I can look past that stuff. That's all kind of like low tier. But the claims of Adam being 930 years old, Seth being 912 years old, the descendants all the way up to Noah are all living between 700 and 900 years old. Noah himself being 950 years old. These are things that don't map onto reality. People do not live this long. People who do live that long usually are mentioned in primary sources. There's usually some evidence for this type of stuff. They'd be super famous because they're living for 900 years. And it's not that long ago, actually, because you can do the math, and you can actually do the math using the Bible to calculate backwards. And for example, you could find out exactly how long the flood was from today. You can use David as your anchoring point, which is David reigns between 1000 and 900 BC. And so you can use the Kings and Chronicles sources where it says in 1 Kings 6:1, Solomon's temple was completed 480 years after the Exodus. So that brings us back to 1400 BC around the Exodus. You can use that and keep going back where it says in book of Exodus, it says Genesis, it says Abram enters Canaan 430 years before that. So we go back to 1900 BC to get to Abraham. And you can keep going back from Abraham to Noah through the generations, Terah, Nahor, Serug, Ru, all the way up to the flood. And then you end up another 292 years from Abram and the flood. Then you do all the math, you end up getting around 2000 to 2700 BC, depending on how you do your math, is when the flood happened. So 2,700 to 2,700 years ago, a flood wiped out the entire world. Everything was dead, except for a boat with some animal, with two of each animal on it in Turkey. So that does not map onto reality, because that would mean that all of the animals, there'd be a huge concentration of life in Turkey. And the more you spread out from Turkey, there'd be like nothing. There would be no animals at all in the New World. How the hell did all these like, I don't know, monkeys and giant cats and leopards get to the New World from Turkey in such a short amount of time? That's like the crux of the Old Testament Torah stuff. But it gets even worse than that, because when was the Bible even written is another question that I want to address, because it is literally fabricated, backdating itself history. There's not a single primary source in any of the ancient world, from Hittite sources, Egyptian sources, Assyrian, Babylonian, anything, Greek, any Bronze Age or Iron Age, nothing, no inscriptions anywhere that mention anything from the Torah. Moses is never mentioned. Abraham is never mentioned. In fact, Abraham fights all these wars, and it mentions kings of Sodom, Bera, Bersha, Shinab, king of Admah, Shember, king of Zeboim or Goim in other sources, and then another unnamed king of Bela, who fights against these other Babylonian kings, Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, and Shedelamer, king of Elam, and then another guy named Tidal, king of the Goyim, king of the nations. These people don't exist in any primary sources anywhere. These are all there's not a single mention of any of these kings. And Genesis is saying that they're all there's like a world war happening, and Abraham's in the middle of it. And Abraham's involved in these battles. And they're fighting over Syria, they're fighting over Mesopotamia, and they're fighting over, and Sodom and Gomorrah get destroyed. And there's nothing anywhere about these 9 kings and Abraham, who at this time would have been 175 years old. 175-year-old man going to battle in Syria with these kings from all over Mesopotamia and the Near East. There's not a single mention in Hittite, Egyptian, Canaanite, Ugaritic, Assyrian, Babylonian, you name it. Nothing mentions this except for the Bible. In fact, no one even mentions anything from the Bible until the Hellenistic period. So the only mentions we get are kings of Israel, like Omri, like Hezekiah, like Josiah. The Assyrians mention how they destroyed Jerusalem in the 6th century BC. There is a mention in the Merneptah about Israel's existence. I'm not saying Israel didn't exist. That's in the Merneptah study. But no one ever mentions Moses, Abraham, Jacob. 12 tribes are never mentioned. There's no archaeology for the 12 tribes being allotted in that land. That doesn't exist. It's made up. There's no mention of Isaac. There's no mention of Adam and Eve and Noah. None of them exist in any primary sources until the Hellenistic period. The first person to mention anyone from the Bible is a guy named Hecataeus of Abdera around 310 BCE. That's the first time anyone ever cites the Hebrew Bible. So, and then you have the prophets, and it looks like the prophets are being added in over time. For example, Isaiah mentions King Cyrus by name, but King Cyrus supposedly lived 200 years after Isaiah. That's not how prophecy works. You don't mention literal people's names, and then we're going to be living in a simulation where there's no free will. Everything's planned out. That doesn't make any sense. The book of Daniel literally talking about Alexander the Great and predicting the king Antiochus IV being, coming in and being the abomination of desolation and all this stuff. It's clearly a Hellenistic text backdating itself to previous times. And this is not the only place this happens. This is all ubiquitous in the ancient world. People write texts, pretend to be prophets, predicting things to a T, but it's written later. And also linguists have pointed out, people who know Hebrew and Greek and all this stuff, they read these texts and they can tell by the way the language is, by the linguistics, that this is a later version of Hebrew or Aramaic or whatever Greek, that this is a Hellenistic text by the way the phrases he's using. It would be like me today being like writing a text saying, I'm living in the year 1400, and I write, Hey, what's up, bro? What are you doing? Like that, people don't talk like that back then. So linguists have pointed out the style of the Hebrew matches up later times than, for example, Daniel, than it would be. So the point I'm trying to make is there's now a mention of anyone. We actually found a city. What about Judean sources? What about the Jewish sources? Don't they mention their own Hebrew Bible at all? Well, it turns out that after when Jerusalem got destroyed by the Assyrians and the Babylonians at the end of the 6th century, at the end of the 7th century, early 6th century BCE, right around 586 BCE, when Jerusalem was destroyed, thousands and thousands of Jews not only got taken to Babylon in captivity, this is historical, we know because the Assyrians mentioned this, but thousands of other ones fled and went down to Egypt. And the Egyptians let them stay in a city called Elephantine. And this city was, let me just mute this.
I was like, I thought I heard music.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to steal that.
Oh, that's okay.
The last point, and I'm almost done here. This city, Elephantine.
Ringwoodite in the mantle can only be released.
Can you guys hear that right now? Or is it muted? Oh,
we
shit.
can hear it.
Guys,
Okay.
leave your
We're not dying.
So,
and I will read all of those later too, by the way,
yeah.
so it's okay.
So my last point was in the early 19th century, 1800s, all the way through the early 20th century, archaeologists started excavating this city called Elephantine. And this is the smoking gun of my argument right now. I really want to deal with this tonight. So this is a Judean city, a Judean colony, if you will. This is where they fled to, inhabited by Jews who worship Yahweh. They have a temple to Yahweh there that's inhabited till 410 BCE. So like 586 to 410 BCE. Perfect time capsule. This is an archaeologist's dream, an anthropologist's dream to find these time capsules. Like, for example, Pompeii in Italy is amazing for archaeologists because we know it ends at 79 BC or AD. So nothing after that can affect the culture. So it gives archaeologists and anthropologists a perfect time capsule so they can examine what was culture like before 79 BCE. Perfect time capsule. Well, we found one for Jews. It's called Elephantine, and they fled there after the destruction of Jerusalem. So this is after the prophets. This is after Genesis. This is after King David, after Kings and Chronicles, after Elijah, after almost everything except for Zechariah, Nehemiah, Daniel. Well, Daniel is actually supposed to be before this, or right around the same time. This is perfect time capsule. We have thousands of texts here written in Aramaic by people who call themselves Yehudim. They call themselves Jews. They know that they said they're from Jerusalem and they fled this destruction. Out of the thousands of texts there, hundreds of good texts, thousands of like little small ones, hundreds of readable good texts that we can read. Guess how much they mention the Torah, their founding mythology? Zero. They never mention Abraham once. They don't mention the Torah once. They don't mention Jacob. They don't mention 12 tribes. All they mention is that they worship Yahweh and other gods too. They're polytheistic. Not only that, they eat pork. They don't honor the Sabbath. They don't even know what the Torah is. We get a letter from around 400 BC from a Jerusalem person, Jew, writing to them, telling them for the first time about Passover. They're learning about Passover for the first time around 400 BC. This is perfect. This is like the smoking gun that all this stuff is fabricated history written later, backdating itself to give themselves a national mythology, just like the Greeks would do with the story of Lysander going up to Mount Delphi and getting the laws from Apollo to bring back to the Spartans. This is what happened with the story of Moses. There's no evidence of anyone citing Moses or anyone knowing anything about Moses until the Hellenistic period. That's my opening statement.
Very well done. Christianity is on the chopping block tonight for sure. I'm impressed. My favorite piece is like learning all of the historical pieces behind like concepts, and you just like laid it out so very well. Ben, I'm going to hand it over to you since Gibbs is running around right now. If you want to give us your initial thoughts with anything Gnostic said, I know you're probably team Gnostic right now, but your initial thoughts on the information.
I did not know that about the city. That's absolutely fascinating. That there are other civilizations that have been dated during the time that the flood would have occurred that Neil just backtracked. I'm curious whether you would be obviously he thinks this is entirely made up. So my initial supposition would have been that it's a regional book. And sure, it's got weirdness in it, but all the mythologies do. They all have different weirdnesses that you can point at and go, that's impossible. But that's absolutely fascinating stuff. I enjoyed where it hasn't even gotten into the New Testament portion. He's breaking down the entire Old Testament currently. So absolutely fantastic. I'll let the other guys go.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Hunter, I'll kick it over to you. Your initial thoughts with everything that Gnostic just laid out there.
Sure. I do want to apologize to see if wires got crossed, but Uncle Doug, unfortunately, I'm not on your side. So maybe it is going to be a 4v1. I apologize if it is. But yeah, I grew up Mormon, was a bit of a Bible basher. It was a Mormon apologist, but that kind of ended after I realized it was kind of bullshit. I'm often a lot more interested in like the historicity of the synoptic gospels rather than the Old Testament, like Gnostic was sort of going over. I really would want to focus on the inconsistencies in the synoptic gospels, how late they were written after the resurrection. I'm pretty passive about this. I'm open to a lot of experiences. I'm interested in truth seeking, and if I end up being wrong about this, I'm happy to pivot. But the things that I remember about reading the Bible is that it definitely felt like there were multiple different genres. There's a lot of different chapters. And I feel worried sometimes that what we're going to do is we're just going to focus and we're going to focus on a lot more historical books and a lot more historical claims. We can look at the traces of lineage in Numbers that we all skipped past other than Gnostic. And, I'm sure that some of those might be historically accurate. I'm not sure, but I will say that like, there are obviously the more outlandish claims, the talking donkeys, the 30 she-bears that ripped apart, or the 2 she-bears that ripped apart 30 children just because they called the prophet bald. There's a lot of really outlandish claims in all of them. But I would concede a few points of historicity. There's definitely some aspects of the Bible that might be a little bit more in line with historical evidence. But I think the issue that I usually have is that proponents of the Bible don't sort of have this grayness to the Bible. They really just claim that it's infallible, that all of it paints exactly one-to-one with history, which makes their claims really easy to attack because there's obviously going to be some aspects that are not in line with historical evidence. I think that's about it. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Sorry if you feel picked on, Uncle Doug.
Well, I'm booting you now. You just made everything completely yes, and Uncle Doug, I'll hand it to you. Your initial thoughts with anything that Gnostic said and the prompt in itself.
Well, I got to tell you, my initial reaction is that the Bible says to avoid useless quarrels, and in a situation where nobody's likely to ever change their mind, that kind of defines as a useless quarrel. So I'm here and I want to present what I think I know for whatever and see. I think that there are evidences of in history, in other cultures, of stuff out of the Torah, out of the Pentateuch. In particular, that's what the first 5 that he brought up initially. For one thing, we have flood legends across lots and lots and lots of different cultures. And there are evidences that I think that point back to Noah from lots of other cultures as well. So we have archaeology that confirms a lot of the places. We have really interesting things. I would refer people to WyattMuseum.com. Ron Wyatt was an archaeologist that identified Sinai, Noah's Ark, the crossing of the Red Sea, and lots of other stuff that you can argue one way or the other about. Sodom and Gomorrah and the destruction of that under the Dead Sea, essentially the lowest point on earth there. But I think there are plenty of evidences. There just recently was some archaeology in Egypt talking about Joseph and them being there in Egypt, him being a leader in Egypt, and so on. So I come at this differently. I'm not a Bible history scholar. I am a walk and talk and reality of Jesus. trusting him every day for the last 20 years, running a homeless shelter and food pantry and listening to him and being directed by God. I hear God. I've seen angels. I've seen demons. I've seen people healed. I don't come at this as theory. This is my reality. So people's opinion doesn't trump my life and my reality and what I see day to day. So I'm coming at this a little bit differently. But I think there are plenty of justifications to believe through archaeology, through other stuff, that a lot of the stuff in the Bible is confirmed, and we know it. We have more proof of that than a lot of other things in antiquity, for example.
Perfect. Thank you, Uncle Doug. And Gibbs, I'll hand it over to you, you little busy bee. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say, guys, this is proof why you don't listen to women, right? Sarah told me I didn't need to have any research ready. Thank Jesus that I didn't fucking listen to her, because Gnostic came in here with very well researched, clearly. And she fucking told me, nah, you'll be fine. Just do it while he's talking. No, absolutely not. Never listen to women. Bullshit. It's bad. All right, that's your first thing. And this is why the Bible tells you. I'm just kidding. We're not going to go into that. Now, as for the Joseph thing, there is evidence of Joseph. I want to mention that. We have specifically in El Adaba. I'm going to fucking butcher a bunch of these names. We talked about the flood myth. We see that all over the world. He would mention that. A lot of this comes out with new studies coming out. We see like the Younger Dryas period may correlate to the flood myth. That would be about 14,000 years ago, as opposed to the biblical 4,000. Some argue this is a regional flood. As for the Red Sea thing, there's arguments to be made that actually wasn't the Red Sea, it was the Reed Sea, which is something that could have happened due to phenomena in like atmospheric phenomena, other shit. Well, we're not going to go into that one. That one's not that really that good. Sodom and Gomorrah is a much better example. I think we have evidence that an airburst occurred in this region, and we found 2 cities in this region that fit the biblical description of this thing. And there's all sorts of examples. We can look at Troy. Troy was considered a mythical city. We can look at Pompeii. He mentioned Pompeii. Pompeii was considered a mythical city by many, many people until you found it. We can mention the Philistines. The Philistines are tied to what we would consider the Atlantean myth, and we really want to talk about this. The sea people coming in and invading. We have evidence of these myths coming in. Now, here's the thing about this, right? I think both Benjamin and Gnostic have touched on this. I would argue that this is not a literal translation. I'd argue maybe that Jesus is actually a recreation of the Dionysus myth, the Osiris myth, where you see these kind of examples come back in history over and over again. Gilgamesh has been tied to Noah. We've seen the lunar cycles with the ages being a reason why people say they're older. We've seen other examples. There's examples of Melchizedek in the Bible, which is somebody that might be tied to the city that he mentioned as one of the first followers of Yahweh, and he's a priest king, and he's not tied to any civilization that we know, but we know that he was a follower of Yahweh that's not of the Abrahamic line, and Jesus later is of the line of Melchizedek. We see these examples over and over again. Religion overall is just a natural is humans trying to make an explanation for things they don't understand. The idea of technology being so advanced that we don't understand it, and it's magic and fundamentally, right? The same thing with nature. Anytime we don't understand nature, humans look for meaning in things. And I think the Bible is an example of this. And this is why when we say, oh, it doesn't have any basis in history, that's utter bullshit. And Gnostic has already given away the game by saying, hey, there are examples in history that can be pointed to and definitively proven by finding these things. We have arguably found Noah's Ark in Turkey now. That's an argument they found. They had a reasonable. Literally, as of last week, we actually have new LiDAR scans as of May 26th being published in the area that they say shows a wooden boat on a hill near Mount Ararat that fits the description of. I mean, this is true. You can laugh. I literally have the sources if you want them, but they literally are saying, "Yeah, I got it. Don't worry." It's literally a new study that just came out, and Turkey's tried to push this down because hey, that would give the Jews power over the Muslims. And this is also the thing. We have Muslim leaders to this day that can trace their lineage back to Esau. Right? This is something that we know for a fact that they can do. I mean, you're just literally the Ayatollah of Iran traces his lineage back and his power back to Esau, like through the lineage. Like, yeah, really. So, like, we're sitting here saying, now, if you want to argue that these people don't exist and then their history is based on total bullshit, I would agree that history goes to the victors and victors get the right history. But if you're going to say it's totally made up and ludicrous, then you're just arguing that history as a whole doesn't exist and all human history is a lie, because every time a new civilization has come in and conquered and established their myths override previous myths. Balderson, here's a prime example of this. He's an Odinist, right? Guess what? The Vikings got conquered either through culture or through violence. violence, and they became Christians, and they had their stuff adopted. The Aztecs, same thing. We can see examples of the Aztecs where their mythology has been incorporated into modern Catholicism. We see this over and over and over and over again throughout history, where a conquering religion comes in and they adopt the local practices and they add this. So I would argue it's less that it's not based in history. It is more in the fact that we need to find out what the actual history is so that we can understand why these people believe these things. Like I said, with the Sodom and Gomorrah airburst thing and all these other things. These are just humans trying to make sense of what they don't understand. And it's all based in some form of history. And we have multiple records of this, all sorts of things. So we can get into the Joseph thing. I have numerous examples for the Joseph thing on why that's actually a thing, and all sorts of these other ones.
Beautiful.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Gibbs. I appreciate that. As a kind reminder to the audience, we will get through this 2-hour discussion. We will read and respond to your super chats at the tail end. And then, of course, if you have something to add on to this discussion or question and answer, we will open up the doors to open panel Q&A session at the tail end of it. And we'd love to host you. All right, gentlemen, I will leave the floor open to you. I want to hand it to Gnostic. I feel like he's got a lot to say if you want to get us started there.
Yeah, the Joseph thing. There's no mention of Joseph anywhere in any sources besides the Bible. The Hyksos king that people identify with Joseph is not Joseph. It's Salatus, and he worships Set. He doesn't worship Yahweh. He doesn't call himself an Israelite. He's not claiming to be from any Abrahamic line. We have sources of this stuff. I'm talking about the evidence. Not when some guy, what Ron Wyatt thinks about
that's
it.
That's not who they're referring to Joseph, by the way. When they're talking about Joseph in Egypt, no, it's Avaris Telhel Dabra. I'm trying to
not a mention of Joseph.
It is the original of Joseph. In fact, it literally backs up.
Let's go.
It literally backs up to the Bible directly, especially with the Exodus. They have a tune. They have a tune.
Hold on. Stop. Time out. Let's go one at a time. I know there's a lot of back and forth of no, it's not, yes, it is, no, it's not. But let's at least get through the clarifications and then we can respond.
There's not a single mention of Joseph anywhere outside of the Bible in Egypt or anywhere. There's people who literally want it to be true, so they go through the Hyksos kings and look for one that sounds the most like Joseph. That's literally the methodology that the source you're citing is. It doesn't mention Joseph once. The king's name is Salatus. So
that's not what I'm referring to, by the way.
And which one are you referring to?
I'm referring to Arvis. Avris
is the name of a city.
Right. And there's a tomb in there that matches to this person, right? That literally mentions a Hebrew man who worked for the king. There's no bones in the tomb, and it's referenced all over how the bones of Joseph were carried out in Exodus. I mean, I can give you multiple. This is we got Associates for Bible Research. This is
he's reading ChatGPT, by the way.
The blogs. I could, yeah, sure, but I have this source. If you want them.
It's not real. This is not real. There's no mention of Joseph. There's no mention of Hebrews at all in the Hyksos period. Hebrews don't even exist yet. That's a later thing.
Yeah, they're of course they don't exist.
They're called Hyksos. That's
exactly. They're like basically missionaries of this.
No, they're not. They don't even worship Yahweh. They worship the god Set, and they worship all the Egyptian.
Fake news.
What are you talking about? This is the evidence, dude. Fake news. You just gave us fake news. You said we found evidence of Noah's Ark on Turkey. That's the biggest bullshit I've ever heard.
There's literally a Fox News article about it right now that's making rounds. It's literally a massive news study that came out.
Fox News says it.
This came out on the 26th of last year. It's a massive new study based off new LiDAR tech that they used in Egypt to find these other pyramids and possibly a second Sphinx. And they could use this same LiDAR tech to discover all the remap things that we already know exist. Like you're arguing
what scholars have been saying
meta technology.
You know,
right now.
You know what scholars have been saying about what you just said? That it's bullshit. People
and then we're finding out they're wrong all the time.
Anthropologists, scholars have all said the Fox News article you're pointing to is nonsense. It's just made up bullshit to dupe people like yourself. No offense, but it's just they just write stuff down. You get these Daily Mail articles saying the Bible is true and we just unearthed it, and it's based on nothing. There's like you said this. It mentions Joseph. I said, where is it? You said Avaris. Avaris is the name of the capital of the Hyksos dynasty. It's not a person. So where's the Joseph inscription?
Are you arguing that they're saying that all these names translated to English or from Greek, from ancient Hebrew are going to be identical? That's ludicrous, and we know that's not true. When we match these things up and they line up one to one, and maybe the name is slightly different, we can tell that once again it is inspired history. Like
you're saying Joseph's name isn't really Joseph. The Bible is wrong. His name is something else.
What did I just say? I literally said that these things have been used to inspire us. Dionysus could be the Jesus myth. Osiris could be the Jesus myth. These are all things that come back and all like over and over and over again. And these are examples. Gilgamesh is being used. And you brought up the kings of these ages. How come we have other examples in history of kings like Egypt and the pre-dynastic stuff? They have a list of kings that go back 10,000 plus years on top of that. We have the same thing with Sumeria. This is over and over and over and over again. We have this multiple evidence of it. There is evidence. Other than each one of these
there's no archaeology.
I'm just going to clarify. I can't hear either of you when you talk over each other. If I can't hear you, then neither can the audience.
Dude, this is how good methodology works. You find a source. You find the Egyptian kings list, and it says this king lived 60,000 years. This king lived 100,000 years. And then you go and you try to find evidence to back up what this papyri says. There is none for what you just said. We don't know about any dynasty of Egypt that had one pharaoh for 60,000 years, or the Sumerian kings that ruled for 400,000 years. That is all mythology. There's no evidence of this stuff.
And yet all these civilizations have the same myth. I mean, there's got to be something there. But it's Occam's razor. What's more likely? Is it more likely they all just have this came out of Fugazi, and it was just it popped in their head, or is it more likely that all these myths were inspired by real events that happened over and over again, and so they all match up in the same sort of lineage? Well, it's obviously not one. That's called the scientific method. You understand our scientific method?
You're not nonsense. They don't all match up. The Atrahasis epic. It doesn't even talk about Noah. It talks about Atrahasis, a different character, and it has a wholly different series of events. It's in a different time period. It's before the Atrahasis epic actually is written before Noah supposedly lived, according to the Bible. Same with the Epic of Gilgamesh. The whole totally different characters.
And once again, you're glossing over what I've said, which was once again that these are inspired by historical events.
They're literary mimesis. So you have one original source, the Atrahasis, Epic of Gilgamesh. I'm sorry, Epic of Gilgamesh first. Atrahasis draws from that and writes another story. The Bible, way later, 1,000 to 2,000 years later, is also drawing from that same global flood myth.
So what about China? Why's China got them then? China, all these are coming from that. Doesn't even make sense at all. You're talking about locations thousands and thousands of miles apart having the exact same myth. We have North America having the same. North America has the same. North America has the same list that these other people do.
They don't have the exact same myth.
Mythology. We have Aztec mythology. We have Mayan mythology. That all
have the exact same myth.
They do. They do have
the Mayan flood story. Does the Mayan flood story say that Noah landed an ark on Mount Ararat?
No, it says that these people came from the sea and brought animals and life to them, and they brought them from it does have this.
Okay. All right, you guys are. I'm gonna call a stall on. I'm gonna call a stall on that one for now.
Be honest, dude. You just made this up.
Let's hand it over
from the West.
Let's hand it over. Let's hand it over to Uncle Doug. It sounds like he had his hand up and wanted to maybe add something in. Go ahead, Uncle Doug. No, you're muted, by the way. Uncle Doug, you're muted.
You're still muted.
There are dozens and dozens of ancient Chinese pictographs. Their language was not letters. Their language was pictures to infer something. The ancient Chinese pictograph for flood is boat and 8 people. The ancient pictograph for garden is a man, a woman, a tree, and a snake. There are dozens and dozens and dozens. In the original language, I believe after the Tower of Babel, people went, created a language.
Not true.
You just lied. They used pictographs to tell the stories right out of Genesis and right out of, not so much Numbers and Deuteronomy, but out of Genesis.
The Chinese pictograph is not of 8 people in a boat. That's made up. Let's pull it up and look at it. It's made up. Did you get this from RonWyatt.com?
You're right. You won't listen to anybody.
I want to see the evidence. Let's see the evidence. You can't just say shit. You can't just say it's no. I'm looking at it right now. It's not 8 people.
At the time of King Josiah, they weren't celebrating any of the feasts.
No, they weren't.
They weren't. They were completely apostate. That's in the 600s BCE.
So when were they not apostate?
Why can't I finish the sentence?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, Uncle Doug.
If we're just going to yell, there's no point.
Well, you guys are spewing nonsense. I got to stop you.
Well, hold on. We don't. Hold on. Let me offer clarification.
Go ahead, Doug.
Okay. So if we want to allow people to say what they need to say, even if we think it's absolutely the dumbest thing we've ever heard in our lives, we still want to allow them the room to finish what they're saying. That way we have the full picture, and then we can say that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Okay. But at least we can give them the ability to say it.
Gnostic brought up a city that was completely unaware of what they believed or what they should have been believing if they were really Jews and if this Torah really existed and all that. But we see the Bible admitting that even in Jerusalem, there were times in the 600s when Josiah was around, before the 400s that you're talking about, when the whole nation was apostate, didn't have the book. It was buried. The temple was being used as a trash dump, and the whole nation was off track. At the time of Jeremiah, he told them, don't run, just stay, you'll be okay. They all went to Egypt, and a whole bunch of them died. There are multiple, all through Judges, there are multiple examples where the entire nation just brain farts everything they're supposed to be doing and believing and does their own thing. So I don't have any problem that there's a denomination, a faction of Jews that go found a city and forget everything that they're about. We see that in the church today. The other thing is, this debate was supposed to be the Bible, not the Pentateuch. And you're hyper focused on the history of the Old Testament.
You can get into the New Testament.
I'm just saying. So far, that's the discussion we're having.
We can get into the New Testament.
I mean, the Old Testament is still the Bible. Yeah. And my comment to Gibbs's line of thinking. So the LiDAR that they used in Egypt on the pyramids, they found that things that are known things were wrong on the LiDAR. So
that's not what they found. They found opposite.
So then when it's saying things that we can't verify, well, when the things that we can verify, there's a substantial amount of them that are wrong. Like when the one came out with all the pillars going down under the pyramid and all these things, there was areas and pockets that they were able to that they've had access to, and it didn't match what the LiDAR was showing.
Well, I want to come back to the flood thing, because this is very dishonest what we did. I'm going to go read several characteristics. Here's the Noah flood characteristics. 1 is bring the animals. That's the one he keeps focused on. 2 is the raven and the dove, and then 3 is that God punished the world. Okay, I'm going to read a couple different synopses of it. Here's the Inca flood myth. Let's do the Aztec flood myth. Hold on, the Aztec flood myth. This is not related. This is the New World. You brought this up. You said, now why would they have this in the New World? The New World. He says, the Aztecs. They said the purpose was a divine punishment, and all right, and they destroyed it, and then they destroyed it specifically because of the wickedness of the woodmen, right? Here's the Mayan one. Same thing. They destroyed a great deluge because, I flipped these. The wooden people were a failed mindless creation and rejected and neglected honor. They were destroyed as a punishment. The survivors, according to some people.
What's the name of the source?
Hold on. I'm going to read multiple. I'm going to read multiple. Hold on. I'm reading. Hold on.
Stop. Listen. Write down your notes.
This is from the Smithsonian. By the way, this is the
Smithsonian. I'm handling this, please. Write down your notes. When they finish talking, then you can go through and call everything stupid shit. Okay. But at the same time, we still have to allow people to talk. It doesn't help any of this conversation if we're just constantly interrupting each other. This show series is meant to not be interruptive. That's the entire.
Can I just ask one thing though? If you're going to cite a source, tell me what the name of the source is.
The Smithsonian Institute. All right, continuing on.
That's a website. What's the name of the source?
The Smithsonian. All right, cool. It's talking about the Mayan flood myth. You can just Google the Mayan flood myth. Hold on. Why don't you just Google the Mayan flood myth? Right. All right. And once again, I want to keep going. I'm almost done with my point here. So I'm going to keep going. We got the Mayan flood myth that matches up similar. We have the raven and we have the Iroquois flood myth talking about all these different ducks.
What raven?
Listen,
let him finish.
My point.
Gnostic, please let him finish.
Listen. So I'm going through these, and we have multiple examples. Here we have the Inca flood pit. We have the Ucha Uno Pachu. This is from Wikipedia. Right here's the quick one. But we also have the Arizona.edu Peru culture. We can do it from the reading of the Inca creation myth if you want that one. So there's a PDF file right there. If you just Google it, the Inca flood myth talks about them being greedy and not paying attention to their gods, and they were flooded for being evil. This is the same kind of thing over and over and over. We have a similar myth from all these different groups. This is in the New World, and I specifically picked the New World. Now, if we want to talk about there, they say they're going to be repurposed. This is from Wikipedia, right? And so I got this. This one's from the Archaeological Shagit tradition from Washington State. The Shagit people tell a great big community filled with male and female of every animal. That's Washington. We have one from Alaska. Similar thing. Hawaiian tradition is another one. They have tell the god Cain. Oh, that's crazy that name's in there. Tells a man named Nu'u. Oh, that's pretty crazy. How would this is not fake. You can look up these Hawaiian. You can look at any of these myths, and these are all similar myths that are all inspired by something. How would it that somebody spelled Nu'u and there's somebody named Cain? Oh, that's total coincidence in Hawaii. I mean, look, okay, well, it's not
Your
fake.
ChatGPT is hallucinating shit to you right now.
You can say it's ChatGPT all you want, but whenever I can provide a source,
name the source. Name the actual papyrus.
I just did this. Is this
name
the
name of the inscription?
I've literally just gone through these over and over again. I've gone through several times. I gave you the Smithsonian. I just gave you Washington, and each one you don't want to fight with the actual source. You just want to say ChatGPT.
I want to know what the name of the source is, so I can look at it. You're just saying.
I'll give you a source.
Post it in chat.
Yeah, here you go. Here's the Wikipedia page. Right here from there. Yeah, I know Wikipedia can be edited, but just for funsies here, I'll put it in the side chat. Here's the Wikipedia, but Nu'u. There you go. They'll have sources there. And here's a different. Yeah, and that's the flood myth from Hawaii. So that's crazy that a Nu'u was given to a guy by name Cain, and he landed on the vessel on top of a mountain, Mount Rhea, on the Big Island. Whoa, wow, that's crazy coincidence that he lands on a mountain, he has floods.
Can I respond?
Idiot. This is a 19th century source.
Yeah, but bro, where do you think these myths are coming from, like Hawaii and all these other? Are you denying that Hawaiians have this myth?
You just cited a 19th century source.
Are you arguing that Hawaiians don't have this myth?
It's from the 19th century, from missionaries.
I'm gonna jump in.
Go ahead, Hunter. Go ahead.
Cool. So here's the thing. I think I'm gonna concede a lot more than maybe Gnostic would here. I think that I could fully recognize that maybe the name.
Here's one from Hawaii University.
Okay, I'm conceding this. Okay, let's just say there are a bunch of flood myths in a lot of different societies, and Cain shows up in one of these stories. First off, there's like 1,000 names in the Bible. You could pinpoint this. There are only so many phones themes that we can specifically pull from to create names. I would expect to see some overlap with 1,000 names. That doesn't, to me, register that this is a true name. What I do want to point out is that it feels weird to look at archaeological evidence rather than geological evidence for the flood. The flood is a terrifying thing to occur. It makes sense that would invoke a lot of mythologies around it. It would invoke this sense of terror. Like, what if this happened worldwide? Like, because we could obviously move from one region to another. It doesn't seem to have a lot of historical parallelisms between the myths, but when we look at the geological evidence, we really don't see that there's no geological evidence that a flood would occur, and that's what I would look for rather than how societies would be talking about it. Personally, that would be more convincing to me.
Yeah, and then you look at the evidence; it all lines up with old Earth stuff. Like, for example, when archaeologists and anthropologists, paleontologists, they dig. And they go, the lower they go, the farther down they go in these digs is where they start to find extinct dinosaurs, stuff like that. They never find them on the top layers. It's always 99.9% of the time they can predict what layers they're going to find what fossils based on time and erosion and buildup of dust.
You're so full of crap.
I'm so full of crap. I'm literally giving you the consensus across the board of paleontology. You think they're 6,000 years old, Doug?
Farmers hit dinosaur bones with their tractors.
No, they don't.
Fields.
No, they don't.
No, they do.
When? That doesn't happen. They dig. It's always put in the bottom layers. They don't find dinosaur bones on top, dude.
Actually, I hate to do this, but Doug is actually right.
No.
Sue, the most famous T-Rex that was ever found, was literally hit by a tractor. And actually, that's a fairly common occurrence in South Dakota.
But I said 99.9% of the time, and I don't know what you're talking about. There's probably some reason.
Well, there's usually erosion that occurs that
builds it back up. From the flood?
No. We're saying erosion like today that takes shows a layer. Yeah, it shows a layer down. And
why are there trees petrified standing up through hundreds of millions of years of geological stuff? I don't think you're presenting truthfully at all.
No, I'm not. I am.
I know that it's your side and you don't want to give up and you got a huge chip on your shoulder about it and you're going to laugh at anybody that says anything different. But how do we have in Texas fossilized footprints of a dinosaur with a fossilized footprint of a human in the middle of it? How do we have petrified boots? How do we have coal deposits where they're finding copper and bronze tools in the coal deposits? It makes way more sense that it's a flood. And then
are we talking about
How do you go from that to a flood? Because there's an
usually we can date the layers, and there's not like a specific time in which all of the biological masses just like died, especially like trees, plants, things like that.
How do you have a tree that doesn't rot through 100 million years of geological layers?
Fossil?
No. They don't rot because they're not living. They're fossilized.
Yeah.
They weren't in the beginning. It was just a tree, and somehow it still survived through layer after layer after layer.
No. They're not surviving. They're like
it would have fallen apart.
They're rocks. They're fossilized. They're not actual trees.
It's not immediately fossilized. The first layer, the first 1,000 years, the tree wouldn't be there anymore. I don't care if it's dead or not.
I have a different question for you, Uncle Doug, because this is something you said a little while ago, and it's sort of been percolating in my head for a little while now. You said that there are historical evidence that we have less evidence for than the Bible. I would love to know what historical events you think that we don't have enough, that we have less evidence for than the flood. And I would also ask, do you think that the more extraordinary claims might require more evidence? But those are two questions.
A lot of the wars, a lot of the early Greek stuff, we have one or two sources telling that story.
Do you think that those are probably debated historically, though?
Copies of the Bible.
Wait, hold on. Wait. You can't point to the copies of the Bible.
What I said was not the flood. What I said was the Bible, which is what the debate was about. The Bible is very, very substantiated and has more copies extant than most of the other things of
when are those copies?
You're pointing copies, but those copies they're copying the original Bible. That doesn't count. I can print my own manuscript. And that, Uncle Doug was born 6 feet.
If I write down Spaghetti Monster real and then just print
it 20 times,
does that make it more true?
It's not because they're all based off of the original.
The answer's no. The answer's no. Does it?
Hold on. I wanted to see what Uncle Doug's response was. I couldn't.
His mic is a little low, so it's easy to talk over.
I'm gonna original manuscripts from very, very early, from 1st century and Jewish.
No, there's not a single manuscript from the 1st century. It's all after 2nd century.
No, we have the Didache and other stuff. The Didache and other stuff.
Scrolls. The Old Testament.
Hold on. Let him finish. Let him finish, please. Thank you.
We have other documents. We have the Oxyrhynchus hymn is from 200 AD that shows a Trinity already thought happening. We have the Didache and other stuff that dates to 100 or just before 100 AD. So, boy, that's distracting. I'm not used to that.
Oh, just ignore it. I'm putting them on the screen so people can still feel love for sending any of the content creators money.
Don't read them and don't pay attention while
don't pay attention.
Okay. Sorry, first timer here. So at the around the Dead Sea, we have balls of sulfur that are like 95% pure sulfur that is not found in nature anywhere else in the world, all around there. And it says it rained brimstone and sulfur, fire and brimstone. We don't have those anywhere else. There are evidences of houses that are squashed, melted as if it was an atomic blast or nuclear, whatever. I think that God just hit it with the thumb of God and squashed it down into the ground. And it's cursed. Nothing grows. But prophecy says that it will, and evidence lately is that it's beginning to come back to life again. I don't see how you just dismiss.
I have a couple things here. First off, I'm not really I didn't really prep that much for the Old Testament. I mostly prepped for Jesus' resurrection because that's usually the hinge point for a lot of religious scholars. So it is interesting. What I will point out is something that we see is that with the Bible, they're not overlapping events, except for one cases, which is the Gospels. What would you say about specific discrepancies between each gospel. Do you acknowledge that there are some, or?
Well, I'd argue with your first premise because there are in Kings and Chronicles a whole bunch of overlap of talking about some of the same stuff.
Okay.
But that's secondary.
Okay.
And they contradict each other too.
As they should. Yeah.
What do you mean as they should? Clarify
one of
that.
them says Satan rose up and told David to make a census. The other one has the exact same story and says God made David do a census. Which one is it? Satan or God? That's a pretty big contradiction there.
Yeah, and both of them are somebody else other than David telling the story.
Of course it is.
And you would expect in court when you're interviewing witnesses to have multiple viewpoints of the same situation.
With that, well, sorry, these aren't small little blips between different testimonies. These are pretty rather large.
Are we talking about David or the Gospels now?
I'm talking about the Gospels. I can hit it over to Gnostic because I'm not familiar with the Kings and Chronicles discrepancy.
Well, I don't think, for example, Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuchadrezzar is historically important to anything that somebody spelled it differently. A lot of Muslim, Islamic, Arabic names, we've kind of phonetically try to get close to it, and the English isn't really the way it would be spelled, and that just happens.
That's fair.
Linguistically, and you would expect some of that stuff.
Yeah,
and the
that's
fact
fair.
that it's even that close means that somebody was transcribing it pretty well, or whatever.
And you're wrong about you're wrong about the vertical sheet-like deposits. That actually happens in lots of volcanic areas.
Yeah, and I was going to say about that the Sodom and Gomorrah thing. Those
Okay,
areas.
but where's the volcano? Where's the volcano in the Dead Sea?
Those areas are mentioned in the Akkadian sources about some sort of natural event that happened in those places, but they don't mention anything about Sodom and Gomorrah. They mention the city Sodom. They don't mention anything about the whole story that you get, the whole narrative you get of Abraham and all the people being wicked and all that stuff.
Why would they? That's not their narrative.
Well,
they
I'm
just know something big happened.
Something
that's
happen.
probably important. Why would that not?
Yeah, the reason why
well,
that's a fair point. Let me explain why. Because if we're talking about a well-known area that people in the region know about, and you have a text that's written later, making up sort of a mythology about what happened in this place. That's what the evidence points to. That's what
okay. Right now, there's a war in Iran.
Yeah.
Which news source is telling the truth? And is describing the story accurately?
None of them.
Do they have competing? Do they have competing facts though?
Yeah, Iran says they're winning. The Democrats say we're losing.
But that's a subjective.
Right. And none of them really.
We're not talking about
telling about what they see from their perspective.
Sure, but if we're talking about subjective or perspective viewpoints, I totally understand that. Yeah, different narratives are going to have different things that they're focusing on. Firstly, I am curious what you feel about the Bible. Is it infallible? Is it the Word of God? If so, why would there be a subjective viewpoint? But the second point, largely, is that there are very objective facts of the matter that are different based off of different testimonies.
Yeah. I can give you one. I can give you one of the most.
I can give you plenty. Yeah, for sure.
Jesus. Luke places the birth of Jesus around 6 or 7 CE because he says it happened during the census of Quirinius. Well, we have inscriptions and other Roman primary sources that say Quirinius was governor in Asia Minor all the way up until around 6 CE. So he couldn't have been. It had to be. He came down to Judea after that to do a census. Also, Matthew's account says he was born during the reign of King Herod, who died in our time, what we say 4 BCE. At the time, it was like the 20-something year of the reign of Augustus. I can't remember exactly which one, but that would have matched up with he died in the year 4 BCE. That's almost a 10-year gap of when Jesus was born. Either he was born under Herod or he's born 10 years later. That's a big difference.
It's not really that big a difference. I want to come back.
But if we're talking about the historicity, wait, hold on.
It's very small.
Because wait, hold on. It depends on what type of Christian, how we're reading the Bible, really. Because I've met tons of Christians who are like, look, this is allegorical. This is a metaphorical reading. I'm getting something out of it. To those people, yeah, those discrepancies don't matter. But the question is it a historical text? So we should be able to look at objective facts between the different narratives and whether or not there are discrepancies. Why?
Let me take umbrage with that. And sure, that's fair. And like, if you want to go literal historical, I agree that 6,000 and 10,000-year-old Christians are some fucking idiots. All right, like I don't agree with that at all. I'm a Christian, but they're stupid. All right, I would argue once again, some of this might have been rehashed. And if you want to argue from the religious standpoint, that would be God making His way known to the ignorant or whatever. But like, that's kind of my thing. I'm not going to argue about a 10-year gap. I can see why y'all want to get hung up on that. That's not really that important to me. And this is why when I brought up these sources, and I actually didn't even know this about the Chinese creation myth, but I've been doing a little research in the interim here. And I posted a PBS article, and they mentioned exactly what the gentleman to my left just said here, where he's saying, all these things like about the Chinese myth, this happened. And I bring up all these other ones, and there's a crazy amount of overlap. How come some of them mention a raven? How come some of them mention a dove? Is it total coincidence that in the New World we have examples where these people that like didn't even encounter Christians, and we know this is their oral history, we actually have the literal writing from the Mayans and the Aztecs, who are different time periods and different regions, from the Incas, who are a totally different area. We have some of the precursors. Like I'm not being dishonest. Whenever I'm sitting here pointing out multiple instances of these exact things.
Which one has the raven and the dove? Which one? Not the New World one. Not the New World one. The New World one. The dove and the raven are from.
I just had that one pulled up.
Mesopotamian myths.
No, that's not true. That is true, but that's also not true. I'll tell you. Give me 2 seconds, and I'll tell you which one.
There's another myth. Berosus has the same myth, where a guy lets Kisithros is his name. He lets off a dove and a raven at the end. This is how we know there's literary dependency. This is how we know it's not a historical claim. It's there's literal dependency from the Noah's flood upon these older myths that don't mention Noah.
No, I have it here. Just give me 1 second. I'll pull it up and tell you.
The dove and the raven are from the Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh and Berosus' flood myth, and also the Bible. It's not in the New World stuff. That was
if I thought it's not dishonest. I just had it pulled up, but I switched. I'll tell you which one.
Judean is a Semitic language, so of course it's from the same sort of linguistic tradition that's getting passed down from people to people. So it's the same story being retold.
One of the problems also is that there's no evidence geologically or anything of a worldwide flood. The idea that above the highest mountain, that's an insane amount of water. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. There is, however, evidence of floods worldwide.
Why are there oysters? Why are there clams the size of your head in the Himalayas?
Because maybe tornadoes, I don't know.
No, it's because of tectonic plates pushing things up over millions of years.
Oh yeah, sorry, fucking of course. That's how mountains are formed.
That's what all the evidence points to. This is what all the scholars, this is what all the researchers, and all the experts are telling us.
Not all.
I trust you over them.
Not all. Yours.
It's the overwhelming. The overwhelming scholar. Yes,
the consensus. The consensus of the scholars.
Not all.
No. The consensus.
There's dissenters, and there's people with degrees that dissent.
Yes, there are motivated reasoners even when it comes to PhDs. I agree.
Okay, all right. And by the way, I have the answer. It's the Chamacho tribe, Louisiana's got it. The modern tribe in North Dakota and the Apache tribe all have different flood myths that all include a dove. So unless you just tell me these tribes,
those are all modern, dude. Those are all modern.
They're modern.
I've looked into this stuff, dude.
So, but they wouldn't get this from the Atrahasis is, right? They would have their own myth dating back from.
No, there is no evidence that they had their own unique version of this story that was not influenced by the biblical story that was told to them by the Puritans and all the colonists.
And how about the Hadia people all the way in like British Columbia?
No. But could you wait? Can we stop moving away from that point? Because it is a super fair point that he's bringing up, which is that a lot of these Hawaiian myths that you're referring to, you said Hawaiian, right? A lot of these Hawaiian myths that you're referring to, if they originated in the 19th century, then of course they probably heard it from Christian.
They didn't originate in the 19th century. Some of these go back all the way back to some of the original inhabitants of the islands.
Can you point to one? Can you point to one that's like inscribed? That all that like the overwhelming consensus agrees is actually from the post from.
I mean, I posted several links in there. I mean, if you want to go through it, and one of them is PBS. We got several from different colleges. We have the Hawaiian from Hawaii.edu. I posted a Wikipedia. We put independent blog.
Can you stop?
I posted encyclopedia.com.
Can we use one? Can we just do one?
When you just start naming,
you are
gish galloping because can we just
focus on one
point?
Let's do.
Ask for sources. I give you sources. It's not a gish gallop.
Let's go one at a time. Then Gibbs, if you want to point out one at a time, and we can go go point by point with those, and that way we can actually kind of have the back and forth on disprove or prove.
So the source that he just sent me from PBS is talking about Mesopotamian myths, Utnapishtim from the Epic of Gilgamesh, the one I mentioned. And then when it talks about the Aztec one, it says there's some similarities, but it doesn't say anything about the dove and the raven in this one. So I don't know how you just threw that in there. Then you
what is that? What are you trying to prove with that source, Gibbs?
Yeah, hold on. By the way, I didn't say the Aztecs had that one. I said there was other sources. And by the way, he mentions 2 of them, and I just mentioned like about 5 that use that right there.
Can we focus on one though? Because if one of them is wrong, then it seems like you are gish galloping. You're just trying to throw as many.
No. Hold on.
Can I clarify what I mean by that?
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems like you're chucking like 12 sources at us, and when we go, wait, what about this one? This one doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, and you're like, well, look at all the other 11 ones. And then we hold up the second one, and we're like, wait, I don't know if this one makes sense either. And you're like, I threw out 10, and you keep throwing more. And it's impossible to climb up the mountain of bullshit.
I understand the confusion, Hunter. Let me explain what's happening.
You're definitely galloping.
I have given you multiple sources, right? And I have not made the claim they all match up identically. In fact, I actually argued once again that once again, there's some of these don't mention all the animals coming in, right? They don't mention repopulation. What I have mentioned is some of these have similarities, like, it's God punishing these people, or they're God punishing these people. And then they have similar, they have similar. So what you're doing is actually the dishonest thing, is you're going, since it's not 100% the same, then it has no validity. And what I'm arguing is,
because God is punishing someone.
Hold on. No, but when there's other things that latch up, like, so coincidentally, Cain and Nu'u, and you have things like these other people, I mentioned similarities between Gilgamesh, between the Chinese, between the Aztec, to the Apache, to the Hadia people, all these different groups all over North and South America and Inca. And I point out each one of these has very similar aspects to the story. Now, they don't all line up exactly 1-to-1, because that's would be ridiculous. And if that did happen, that would prove definitively.
Why would that be ridiculous?
Because Hunter, listen, if I have something that happens to me, and I don't know, say it happens to me here in Texas, right? And I tell you my version of events, and then you have a similar situation that doesn't line up exactly to your thing, but it's caused by the same thing. That is hold on. If the Yellowstone volcano goes off, right, and it affects you, and say, I don't know where you live. Let's say you live in Seattle. And your version of what's going to happen with the Yellowstone, sure, whatever, okay, even the same thing. Your version of what happened with the Yellowstone volcano going off is going to be similar, but probably different to my retelling of that event happening here in Texas.
For sure.
So when I am mentioning 15 different things that all have at least 60% of the same story, and they're from all over the world, it does prove that this event probably happened in some capacity.
Here's the difference. I agree with you. I agree with your metaphor. I don't think it's analogous to the situation though, because if the volcano exploded, for sure I should probably have a retelling of it. I should say, there's fucking ash in the sky. It's crazy. We've actually seen this. There was 150 years ago. I forget exactly. It's a while ago. There was the entire world almost got covered with like ash from one volcano. I don't know. Remembering this vaguely off the top of my head. I forget the exact, but basically every historical record of that day says, holy shit, the sun isn't out. This is crazy. Every single historical record is very in line with those basic facts. Now, they might disagree on the color. Some might say a dark gray, some might say a light gray, for sure. There's going to be some discrepancies. But the base facts of the matter, there's probably needs to be some through line when it comes to.
You agree there was a flood of some kind?
Yeah, the other big.
There was probably a regional flood in some areas, of course.
Say it was regional floods in some areas. Would you agree that it was probably caused by one larger natural disaster, like, I don't know, a comet possibly hitting up in the Northern America that raised sea levels potentially?
I don't think we have evidence for that. I would be open to evidence for that.
I don't know. I don't think it's
the biggest problem here is for your story to hold up, Gibbs. There was only the people on that ship that survived. Why would there be varying stories?
No, I would argue that once again, it's the same thing as with Cain.
Survivors.
Well, this is the same argument I would make with Cain, right? When Cain goes, he's worried about people in the world, it implies there's other people in the world. Even the Bible is not super consistent on that. Maybe God made other people. Maybe there's other groups of people. Maybe there's other types of people. I would argue, once again, maybe there's survivors that are not just Noah, but they come from some precursor.
That's just post-cost rationalization. You're just making it
no, it's
fit.
not. I mean, once again, I'm just saying I'm making it fit. That's what all archaeology is you have a theory based on historical evidence. They used to think Troy was just a total myth.
No, that's not true.
Then we found Troy.
That's
Troy,
false.
it used to be Troy.
Nope,
No,
you're
it's not.
wrong.
It
You're lying.
literally, Troy was
I gotta respond to
not
this.
lying. Troy
All right,
was literally considered
not
a
true.
mythical story that didn't
And
happen.
Jericho,
Honestly,
and Nineveh.
Okay.
Right.
Gnostic, tell us. Hold on, everybody,
I gotta
shut
respond to
up.
this.
Gnostic, go ahead and tell us about Troy.
No one ever doubted the existence of Troy. Troy is mentioned in the primary sources in the time of Augustus, for example. Augustus went there and rebuilt the city and brought it back up to Roman standards of the 1st century BCE. And it was inhabited by people all the way to the Byzantine region, Byzantine era, I think 11th century, when it finally started to become uninhabited. And the only thing people doubted was the Iliad, the Trojan War with the Trojan horse. People still doubt that today. But when they found Troy, no one was saying Troy's made up. We know Troy existed.
They said that for hundreds of years. They said it for hundreds of years. It was made up until the 1870s. But that is absolutely unequivocal fact. You're the one who's lying now.
Hold on. The two of you, listen, hold on. The two of you, listen to me. We still have Gauntlet later. You can go hash it out and yell at each other all day long later on during Gauntlet. But right now, I want to be able to hear both of you, but I absolutely can't because you're both just hollering over each other. If we could find some form of respect, at least to the conversation, that would very much help us move forward instead of me stalling you out and talking every 5 minutes to interrupt. Okay, go ahead, Gnostic.
As I said, when Schliemann discovered Troy, people already knew Troy was a real place because it's mentioned in all the primary sources all the way through the Renaissance. There's Renaissance writers in the 1400s and 1300s writing about Troy, historical Troy. No one doubted Troy. People doubted the story about Homer. Homer's Iliad is a myth. That's what people doubt. People still doubt that today. Now, Schliemann's discovery did actually attest that there was some sort of war that happened there. So now there's more and more scholars, I think it would be a minority view, that think there was an actual war. They've even found a Hittite source that mentions the king named Alexandru, who some scholars think is the Paris, who's also called Alexander. But the point is, no one ever doubted Troy as a city existed. You just threw that in there to make it seem like scholars are always wrong until you find
the ancient Greeks even thought it used to be a myth, bro. Like you're just lying. You're just
lying.
lying.
What are you talking about? They lived in the city, dude. What do you think they thought it was meant? They lived there.
But they did not live there. They literally said that the Romans.
You know, Troy's Bible.
Here,
Go ahead, Uncle Doug. Chime in on this, please.
I'm at a disadvantage because I took debate in high school where you write it on a card and you're graded down if you just insult the other team and scream and yell. So I didn't take TikTok debate. I took actual debate in high school. So I'm at a real disadvantage here. But let me point out that Troy's not in the Bible. And also, another thing to consider, you have a real serious population problem without the flood. If you track back at the current growth rates, even if you accommodate for plagues and Mongols killing everybody and whatever, if we drop the population typical growth rate to a quarter of what it has typically been, and we go back 10,000 years, 50,000 years, you cannot hold all those people on the earth and feed them all. There has to have been a major depopulation event.
I have a question. You understand that the growth rates now are much better because we've industrialized and commercialized food, right?
What's the argument?
That the growth rate then wasn't the same. Now that once everybody could eat, like the baby boomer generation, and everybody had food in the house.
Even if you accommodate for all of that, if you decrease the birth rate now,
the babies survived instead of like
75%
dying off.
You're both talking.
Comparable growth rates to antiquity in places where survival is very, very difficult. We have modern places.
There's nowhere that's comparable because we don't have constant conflict so much between different regions.
Yeah, there's countries where they're wiping each other out, and the baby's mortality.
Hold on. Not historically
super high, and other stuff.
Not even close to historical. Like 2,000 years ago, there was wars between regions constantly. Now we really have one, and it's a big deal. Like Russia versus Ukraine, it's a huge deal right now. Before, like 2,000 years ago, just every region would constantly be fighting and warring with each other.
You're telling me in the last 200 years, we haven't seen any countries anywhere in the world.
No, I would point to probably
just wiping them all.
Sorry, I think that you're kind of distorting my view. I think I'm really just pointing to post World War II, where we sort of solidified
I'm talking about population data.
Right, but we're usually using population growth post World War II when our records are a lot more.
So you agree that Sumer existed, right? The Sumer civilization.
This problem with plagues and wars and everything else.
Hold on.
Would be way too many people on the planet.
Did you have something back for share screen, Gnostic?
Yeah, pull that up. This is the census. This is an estimation based on archaeology, based on digs of what happened to my screen. Oh, based on digs like Sumer, for example, the Aegean was populated, Crete was populated. We know that there's literally cities. Jericho's a city at this time. There's all types of places. We have a population estimate based on the evidence that there was 27 million people living on the planet known to us right now in 2000 BCE. And this Noah's flood, I did the math in the beginning, you can't get anywhere outside of 3000 or 2000 BCE if you do the math according to the Bible. So you're saying 8 people populated the world to 27 million.
Wait, what was the population?
Hold on, Gnostic. This is fake. It says 10,000 BC, and we know that the world is only 4,000 BC.
Ah, you got me. You got me. But I'm just saying, if we're going on the evidence, how the hell, if the archaeologist is true and the evidence points to this population, how the hell did 8 people make the world populate into all these gigantic city-states within a couple of generations?
And what's the population now?
Wait, I do have a question, Uncle Doug. How old is the Earth?
However old God says it is.
Okay, so 4,000 years old?
Or wait, not 4,000. Nobody
6,
says 4,000.
6,000. I apologize. It's 6,000 years old.
Well, technically, the Bible says the earth became shapeless and void, so it existed before time recorded. So we don't really know.
Without people, though.
Something was there before the first day and night.
Without people, though. Well, we could find evidence of people, like Göbekli Tepe, for example, it was like 10,000 BC. What do you think about Göbekli Tepe? Is it fake?
Well, it doesn't technically say without people. It just it became shapeless and void. So we don't know what happened technically.
Well, no, it actually says Adam's the first created man. Is that true or not?
Yeah.
First created like Homo sapien.
Wait. Okay, wait. This is the weirdest argument because you have to concede, right? That like when it comes to historical records, hold on, just listen to my question for a second.
He doesn't concede. Why do I got to concede?
Fair. You don't have
to.
You don't have to do shit. I have a question for you. Do you concede this? Do you concede that historically speaking, every historian on planet fucking Earth?
No, automatically not. Automatically, that's a lie.
Do you want to finish it?
99.999%.
No,
okay,
no.
whatever. I'm gonna say it. Believe
majority,
that the Earth is
majority. You can say majority and it'd be
finish
true.
it.
Majority.
You can say most.
Okay.
But you can't say all.
You seem to be getting the hang of the
Large-
over-talking thing.
Yeah.
You can't size up to that.
Thank
He
you.
figured
I'm
it out.
trying to fit in,
He
man.
figured it out. Finish the thought.
I'm gonna say 99%, rounded down. Okay, 99% of historians agree that the Earth is longer than 4,000 years old. It's like what? I don't even know.
You keep changing numbers.
Sorry.
No, I don't agree.
I don't fucking know. I don't know. 6,000 years old.
I don't agree.
You don't agree that that's historians'
believe that.
perspectives? That there are civilizations that we can date that are 10,000 years old?
I don't think they're 10,000 years old. I don't think they're that old.
No. I'm not asking whether or not you think that. I'm asking, do you agree that historians think that?
Oh,
Largely
sure.
speaking.
Yeah, I would agree
Well, it
with
feels
that.
weird that we're asking about the historicity of an evidence when it seems like you reject historians' consensus.
Yeah, but Hunter, some of those civilizations though that we brought up once again, and this is like the ancient kings list kind of problem. Some of those like Sumerian kings, some of them like the Egyptian kings. I could look at maybe a couple other. They go back 1,400 years, like not 1,400, 14,000 years, right? Mm-hmm. And like those would argue go back. But then what we have the same problem. We get to like the old pre-dynastic fucking shit that like in Egypt, and it goes back like 8,000-9,000. Then some of these kings live fucking for 2,000 years, right? And it's so I mean maybe not 2,000, but hundreds of years, right? And so it's like, okay, why in this case does it prove your point? But then when we bring the same argument up, to disprove ours, like, okay, you either accepting these civilizations, hold on, these civilizations either track it back all the way back to these pre-dynastic, like, I don't know, Nephilim or whatever civilizations, or like ancient kings, whether the gods, like coming back, they go back this far, or like now. And I would argue like, yeah, I don't agree that it was probably these guys living for 600 years. I would argue that they had some kind of different understanding of what a year was. Maybe they wrote it down differently, or it was part of a myth. But there's something based in history that's going to cause you to go back this far, right? And that's why I said earlier, 6,000-year-old Christians are idiots. Like,
sure. The issue here is that the reason why we know that these civilizations are 10,000 years old isn't because they wrote in their fucking journal, 10,000 BC. Okay, that's not how we know that. There's carbon dating. There's ways to check whether or not how old these civilizations are. Now, I'm not an expert in this. I'm sure that I can go find out how specifically these archaeologists are able to date this, but they do date this not through the facthood of the journal keeping, but by the rocks and the textures and the.
No, they don't.
Okay, sure. There are guesstimates, but it's within a margin of error that is never within
like
6,000 years.
Yeah, but okay, so let me ask you a question. Why do we have coca plants in Egyptian tombs if there was no pre-trade with the Americans, right? Like, so this is the same kind of thing.
Rich people like cocaine.
Sure, but the coca only grows in where? Like South America, right? So how the fuck did they get coca plants in Egyptian tombs? How do we have examples of tobacco in Egyptian tombs? So are we just saying like there are history, but we don't understand how shit's not here.
The issue with this debate is like you could just say anything, and it's like I don't know how to take this one step at a time, like because it does feel like we just jump from point to point when it doesn't, like, instead of just honing in on one point. I don't know about those cocoa plants. I've never heard of this. Okay, I'm sure that maybe it was confusing to historians until they figured it out, or maybe it's still a question mark. Okay, maybe we're just using God of the gaps arguments. I don't know. Can we hone in on one argument?
Pre-dynastic. There's pre-trade before we know. But like,
but Gibbs, you also concede that the Earth is 10,000 years, or sorry, is like what is the actual Earth age of the Earth? I don't know.
Billions of years old.
6,000.
I know.
I just wanted to see
4 billion.
there. With your argument, Gibbs, there's an argument to be had that that the pyramids and all those in the tombs, things like that, it was built during an Egyptian wet period. We don't really know what they grew.
So there could have been coca other places.
Yeah, why don't we just do that? Why don't we just make up things and then you have to go fact check them?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just pointing out historical examples.
Actually, they did trade with them. Actually, there was.
I would argue they did have trade.
That happened. We don't have evidence for that, but I could.
Well, I would argue that this kind of like leads, and like I know I'm going to say something, and Gnostic's going to fucking snap here, but this is kind of like the same thing that Randall Carson keeps saying on all these fucking ancient myth things, where it's like, oh, you look at these things, there's clearly some sort of history that we don't understand. We're seeing more and more where like there's either maybe it's not a pre-dynastic or not like maybe it's not this like worldwide civilization that's got nukes or magnetism or whatever, but we're obviously seeing that there was some sort of like trained civilization that was before like what the agreed history is. You bring up Göbekli Tepe, right? People said like 9,000. Used to the standard was about 9,000 years ago. We started getting where you have like farms and shit, and now we're seeing Göbekli Tepe where the history goes, well, if these guys are all just farm like nomadic grazers or farmer or like hunter gatherers, why are they building monuments in Göbekli Tepe? We're seeing examples over and over again where history goes back further than we think, and I actually think this proves biblical myths in some regard.
Because you're saying
Göbekli Tepe scholars, PhDs.
But you're saying look, sometimes
it goes back further than 10,000 years, right?
By the way, Randall Carlson is the same guy who said that the word Levite in the Bible, which is a Semitic word in Hebrew, means levitate, which is a word that comes.
Yeah, well, I don't agree with everything he says. I'm just using it as an example. Like, I think there is something here with this idea that there were civilizations older than 10,000 years, and there was some sort of catastrophe that like just wiped out a majority of them. I don't know if it's one civilization or it's 50, but I think there's plenty of evidence starting to come up that there was something going on more than just hunter and gatherers 10,000 years ago. And I really don't know if that's like even really that widely of a controversial thought now at this point. And if that is true, then that leads to the credence that Bible is real history because it mentions a lot of this stuff in reference to it. And I think this is, once again, even if they're getting told this stuff at a later date, they're referencing real events, which is real history. Just like with Troy, we use the mythology of Troy to find Troy. Like we're finding these over and over and over. We use myths to discover the history. That is real history. I don't understand why y'all disagree with that. Do you disagree with that? Like,
well, the Younger Dryas theory is actually widely rejected by most scholars in that field. They don't think that there was some impact.
And the guy that the guy that built the pyramids is like also got like all sorts of stuff that like is not based on total like modern Egyptology is not based on like anything like concrete either. So like all of this is theory. Like I mean, I'm open to being changed. We don't have an example of macro evolution, but I believe evolution happens. Do you disagree with the theory of evolution?
You're missing the motivation. There is a very weird survivorship bias that's happening here, where you're recognizing that some myths do get confirmed sometimes because people are motivated to look where there's there's societal pressures for, someone is like, oh well, I heard about this myth, I want to go see if that's accurate. So yeah, we would see some myths confirmed, I'm sure, but that doesn't, you keep using that as a pivot point to say, well then all myths are true, and that feels like a crazy leap to make.
I didn't say that.
Okay, sorry, that the Bible is true because other myths are true, because sometimes we might look and see, I don't know what, like, it feels like a very strange tactic. Does that make sense?
Well, hold on. I think you're missing what I'm doing here. What I'm saying is that the Bible is real history. I think all religions are real history. I think like to some extent,
all religions.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay.
Scientology?
Yeah, no. Sure, but like Islam that's a real religion.
Yeah, I would say they trace their lineage back to Esau.
By your opening statement, where it was prolific, how widespread the Bible is. L. Ron Hubbard is the most prolific author in modern history.
Fair, sure. But my argument is that like all these religions are trying to explain natural phenomena, right? Like Sodom and Gomorrah, he mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah. I would argue that was probably an airburst, like explosion of some kind of meteor or a comet or something over. We have examples of that, like in Tuskegee, Tuskegee in Russia. We have examples of this. Other things, I would think maybe if like a comet or something came over and blew up in the air, like that could crush it, cause these things. There's some evidence to support that theory. Then obviously, if I'm a little, I don't know, an uneducated person living in some village in the middle of, I don't know, Mesopotamia, and all of a sudden I see some big explosion in the sky and some cities are wiped out, I'm probably going to be like, that's God, right? Like, I mean, wouldn't you do that if you were that thought? I mean, this is just humans trying. I mean, religion is the precursor to science, and science is just trying to explain the natural world the same way. And so I'm saying all these things are actual history. And if you're actually religious, I'm not discounting it as a Christian. I'm saying that these Christian things are just God making his way known to y'all. So I'm not maybe as much of a literalist as some of these people, but I do think that there is real history here.
No, but you're doing a weird thing where you're saying that like it's kind of the Jordan Petersoning of like, well, did actually the Exodus happen? He's like, well, it happens every day. It's like, we can use it through this meta. It's like, okay, but that's not what we're having the argument about right here. Did that literally happen?
Because if it didn't literally happen, and this is all metaphor, and it's all just kind of like symbolic.
I'm fine with that version of
saying it did literally happen. These things are literal events.
These are maybe not a literalist. I can't follow.
These are symbolic metaphors. Then did Jesus really need to die for our sins, or is this all symbolic too? Because if this didn't literally happen, even Jesus in the Gospels is referencing the flood and referencing Adam and all this stuff. If this is all symbolic, then is his death just symbolic too? Right?
And I have no issue with
I
this.
think you're missing what I mean by
Christianity,
literal versus symbolic.
Okay, go ahead. If you want to clarify.
So, like, I mean, just to clarify, okay, when I'm saying something, let's go back to you, Sodom and Gomorrah, because I think this is an easy one that's like not really that controversial with the airburst theory, right? Like, I'm saying that probably literally happened. Like, there was probably some sort of event, whether it was volcanic, right.
And so people have down, and someone went, that's because angels tried to rape someone.
Right. Yeah. Well, or they tried to rape the angels or whatever, right? But
I can't even remember the vibe.
That's not what the Bible says.
It's been like 10 years since
I with the R word, please.
Oh yeah, the great. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's they tried to essay the angels, right? But they're over here trying to do this, and so they bombed them, right, or whatever. And so my argument is, okay, these people took what they knew of these places and then extrapolated that, and they tried. So this event probably happened, just like Pompeii. They were probably like the gods were mad. They destroyed Pompeii when it really was a volcanic eruption. There's a reason why all the flood myths event. I think there was some event in history that caused large flooding either locally or worldwide. It's too widespread for too many myths overall for it not to have some sort of event where multiple people groups saw similar things occur. And that's why the stories maybe don't 100% match up, but they match up on a similar level overall. And we see this over and over and over again. And I think this just proves that this is real history.
Wait. It seems like you're on our side, Gibbs. Like genuinely, I'm confused by what you're saying here. Because of course I would probably concede that a lot of these stories.
You're on my side then.
Okay.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Go ahead, Hunter.
I would obviously say, okay, well, it's certainly true that Jesus was likely this prophet that had not prophet. He was a speaker, and he spoke to a lot of people, and a lot of people followed him, and then he died, and it was a huge event, and then his body got taken from the temple, or from the tomb, and everyone was wondering what the hell happened. And then 50, 60 years later, people started writing stories. Yo, that guy, remember that guy Jesus? And they start developing this mythology out of him, and it becomes more and more
ridiculous.
Why is that ridiculous?
Hold on. Let him finish.
This is Gibbs's argument. Here's what I'm saying.
But that's real history, though, isn't it?
No.
Yes, sure.
Let Hunter finish.
Jesus was a historical figure. Of course, he existed. Okay, I don't think anyone's contesting that. Gnostic, do you think that Jesus?
No, I think he existed, but I don't think it's. I don't think it's
okay,
yeah.
So that historical fact is accurate,
Right,
and
so
then they
that's real
add
history,
the
you'll agree
mythology
with me.
on top of it. So the specific mythological components are inaccurate. Gibbs, do you agree?
I don't. I mean, it depends on which specific mythological aspects, but maybe some of them. My
okay,
point is, but you're proving my point though, right there, because y'all both admitted Jesus existed probably in some capacity, which is my whole argument. Which is my whole argument that the Bible is pointing to real history, and people are using these things as an explanation. So thank you for granting my case. I agree.
Matthew says that zombies came out of the ground and were walking around in Jerusalem when Jesus was on the cross.
And no one else has mentioned that, by the way. Not even the other Gospels mention that.
Maybe the Haitians got some.
The entire resurrection story doesn't match in any of the Gospels. They have wildly different.
Of course, this is.
Hold on, Hunter.
Okay, sorry.
Ben, I didn't hear you.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said none of the resurrection story matches in any of the Gospels. They have wildly different details. How many people were there? What happened
when he died?
Like, one of them, a naked boy runs out of the tomb, and the ladies are like, "Oh shit!" and then they just run away too. Like, wildly different.
Well, where does a naked boy run out of a tomb?
Mark 14. Well, not out of the tomb. He runs out of the garden, not out of the tomb.
They grabbed his cloak and he took off while they were
he
holding
ran
his
away
cloak.
naked. Yeah,
and presumably
he wasn't
the gospel
naked.
writer himself.
Okay, so he wasn't naked when he ran out.
No, he wasn't standing around the garden.
He was wearing a sandal.
That doesn't exist in any of the other ones.
It wasn't the tomb.
There's that feature happens in all of them. There's huge parts of the story that don't match the other ones.
Linguistically, literally from a writing standpoint, the argument is that the gospel writer himself was the one talking about himself having his cloak ripped off and running away.
So how did he know about all the other events if he wasn't there? If he's just in that one scene, how does he know about all his other stuff?
Because he interviewed lots and lots of people.
Oh, no.
Or because he based it off of Mark's testimony.
Yeah, because Mark's the original. Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's what I said. Yeah, he's basing it off of Mark's.
Go ahead, Doug.
I had a conversation with an atheist one time, and I said, "What would it take for you to believe that God exists?" And he said, "If God would vaporize the entire universe in front of my eyes and then recreate it all back the way it is, then I'd believe."
So,
which is a crazy, insane bar.
I'm not an atheist, Doug.
Wait, hold on. Who here said that?
Kind of requirements.
Yeah, this is a red herring. I don't know.
I judge whether it's going to hold me up or not. I don't require.
I'm not even an atheist.
Recreate whatever.
I don't care about that.
Okay, you're missing the whole point. The point is nothing, no matter what, is going to change some people's mind.
Evidence would change my mind. That's what I'm asking.
I met Jesus in person. He runs my life every day. I ask him what shirt to wear, what to eat. He pays my bills. I've been totally dependent on God for 20 years. Jesus is real. Odin never did crap for me. Thor never did crap for me. Buddha never did crap for me.
The difference is you never believed
in those individuals. Taking care of me for 20 years. I've seen demons. I've seen angels. I've been to heaven. Either I'm a raving loony or I'm telling the truth, because that's the way Jesus was. Either he was the son of God, as he said he was, or he was a raving loony.
False dichotomy.
Wise prophet.
No, that's a false dichotomy.
He never even claimed he was God.
Eyewitnesses. My turn. Eyewitnesses that walked with him gave their lives.
Nope.
They wouldn't do that for a lie. It wasn't 50, 60 years later. Immediately. And where's the body? The government didn't have it, or they would have shown it. The disciples didn't have it.
What?
Immediately, these people went all over the world and gave their lives for something. You don't do that if you know it's a lie. You don't do that for a literary fabrication. There's plenty of examples of why this is real and why it's the best way to run the world. Why the stuff Jesus said is a better way to establish culture, to get to live together, to play nice with one another than anything else man has ever created. There's wisdom there we don't have anywhere else, unless it's derivative of that.
So
you realize the proofs that you listed were also in the literary, it only exists in the literary work that we're questioning?
So first of all,
wait. Can I go?
I said in the beginning.
Also, I want to respond to that super chat.
I'd like to
go. The super chat. I would like to respond to.
We will do all of the super chats at the very end. But again, let me give you guys all the kind reminder. When you were given the run of show before we got here, all of that information specifically said polite debate. And I know I said backstage, no interruptions. Let's not be buttholes. Let's get through an actual discussion. It's a learning perspective. Okay. So please, again, I'm going to say this one last final time before I just start tucking people away or muting you up. Stop interrupting, go one at a time, or I might actually have to do the talking stick game and you're not going to like it. Thank you. Okay. Doug, I think you were finishing up a point. Ben, I think you were saying something. Hunter, I think you were saying something. And Gnostic, I know you want to chime in. So let's go in that order. Doug, finish your wrap up. I think you had something.
I love you.
Finished before I said that.
I love you. I'm grateful for the time. Jesus loves you. He's real, and folks need him. Nothing else is the answer to the problems of man.
Okay, Ben, to you. I think you had something to throw in there.
You understand that the proofs you listed about the things that happened to the apostles are also only in the book we're questioning?
No. We have lots of church history, lots of early church history, lots of people that were mentored by those people telling the story.
320 until the 300s.
That's not true at all. The church existed from the very beginning. The Roman church didn't exist until the 300s, but the church was there all along.
Yeah, but you don't have anything other than Paul and then Clement of Rome in 96. That's a big gap. You don't have any sources before that. You just have Paul's letters. Paul says he never even met Jesus.
There's a whole tradition that's talked about by the early church fathers.
Who?
Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, all of
Martyr's
those guys.
in the 100s. He's 2nd century.
And he's telling about what the church has been through up to that point.
Yeah, so what? He's not an eyewitness. Luke even says he's not an eyewitness. The author of Luke Acts says,
"What were you an
I'm going to
eyewitness
tell
to?
you the story, what the eyewitness is." He says, "I'm going to tell you the story of what the eyewitness
to." You're entirely not credible.
What, now you can cut me off now?
Yeah, let's hold on. Okay, I'm going to play the talking stick game. Okay. I'm actually going to hand it over to Hunter because that was who I said was next to begin with. We're going to start there and then we'll continue Gnostic and Doug after that. Hunter, go ahead. I know you have a question. I'm sure Doug will have to have a response to that. So go ahead.
Cool. I didn't think my Mormon background would come up, but this is going to be part of my question. I assume you are not a Mormon. Is that fair to say? Awesome. The arguments that you were using for like the apostles, they went out, they believed in this, they took solace in Christianity. You wouldn't see that from someone who genuinely didn't believe this. What's really interesting about that is that's the exact same argument that Mormons use. They talked about Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith and how they took solace in the Book of Mormon minutes before they were dead. There was journals saying, here is a verse that they used, and there's this famous talk by one of the apostles, Jeffrey R. Holland, who talks about he's like, why on earth, if they really fabricated this, would they take solace in a book that they fabricated right before that they knew that they were going to die? And it feels interesting that you're using the same argument about the apostles, but you're not applying it to other martyrs of different religions.
Were they taking solace from the book before or after they shot the people coming for them?
Before.
Joseph Smith and his brother both shot and killed people in the Carthage jail.
Yes.
Which martyrs don't do.
Okay, wait, but no. But you're voting my point. You're voting my point. They took solace in a book that they fabricated.
Right.
Why is that not evidence for you to now become Mormon? If it is evidence to become Christian.
They didn't take solace in Nephi and the
they did.
cities in the New World. They took solace in all the stuff he stole from the Bible.
Wasn't
It's
Paul
supposed
a
to be a
known
new
murderer?
revelation,
It was
not
a
instead
hold
of.
on. It was a verse from the Book of Mormon, and it's not one of the things that they just plagiarized. They just stuck from Acts. It was one of their own creations.
I know people die for stupid reasons. That's true.
Okay, why can't I apply that to the apostles?
Well, for one thing, because those guys were trying to save their lives. Those guys were shooting other people through the door.
Okay.
To try to save their lives, which is
I'm
not
not defending Joseph Smith, just to be super
not
clear.
like Jesus.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So first of all, a lot of the martyrdom stories about Peter and Paul and those guys are later apocryphal stories from the 2nd century that aren't mentioned by earlier sources. You don't actually have anything before Clement of Rome in 96. Paul is the only 1st century sources we have other than Clement in the Gospels, and Mark is the only original text. Matthew's copying word for word, verbatim, the same exact Greek lines from Mark and adding a few things here and there that people think is from a different source. They call it Q, whatever. Luke also admits to not being an eyewitness. Luke literally says, from what the witnesses handed down, I'm going to tell you the story. And not only that,
which is what you're doing.
Paul literally says, I never met Jesus. I met him in a vision. So Paul not even met Jesus. And then he just says 500 eyewitnesses saw this. We don't know who these 500 eyewitnesses are. None of them wrote anything down. We even have contemporary authors from the time. Philo of Alexandria is a good example, a Jewish author who wrote in Greek. He was Jewish. He writes about the Son of God being the Logos and how coming to the world and giving a cup that people can drink from and become grafted in and have salvation. He's very Christian. He's very proto-Christian in that sense. And he writes about Pilate. He mentions Pilate. He mentions Herod. He mentions Agrippa. He lives before Jesus. He's born in 20 BC, and he lives all the way to 50 CE. And for some reason, he just didn't know who Jesus was. So that tells me this wasn't that big of a deal. It doesn't mean Jesus didn't exist. I'm not making an argument from silence in that sense, but I'm saying all these gigantic claims about miracles and raising people from the dead and coming back from the dead and zombies coming out of the ground would be in the primary sources that actually are contemporary. There's no zero contemporary sources. There's zero physical primary evidence other than a stone that mentions Pilate. That's basically it. But I'm not talking about Jesus and the apostles. And then so the first primary sources we get from the church is all 2nd century stuff. And then the first time anyone writes about Christianity, Pliny the Younger, you know what he says? He writes to Trajan. He says, "Oh, we give these Christians the option. We give them the option that they can hail Caesar and worship Caesar, or we kill them." And you know what he says? He says they all end up worshiping Caesar, and then we let them go. And Trajan goes, "Good job. Make sure they honor Caesar, and then leave them alone." So they do the opposite. They're not dying. They're actually lying to get out of it. And then not only that, the idea that people die for stuff they believe in. Herodotus talks about a group of people in Thrace who worship Zalmoxis, who literally go willingly to be thrown into a spear, because if they land on the spear and die, it's a good omen. If they fall and survive, it's a bad omen. And people were willingly going to their deaths, according to Herodotus, for this Zalmoxis character, a real mortal person who supposedly died, and came back to life 300 years later. A dying and rising figure mentioned in Herodotus. So this stuff is ubiquitous in the ancient world. There's some magical.
And they absolutely believed it was true.
Yes.
My point wasn't that people don't die for things. My people was that people don't typically die for what they know is a lie.
So they believed in it.
Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned the early church.
One more thing.
It was just 50
Hold
years later.
Hold on. Go ahead.
You're also assuming that they had a choice. They had a choice to survive or something. How do you know that? How do you know they weren't just killed? And then, I don't believe in it anymore. How do you know that didn't happen? You have no idea.
They weren't rounded up in Jerusalem and executed on the spot. They spread out all over the world. And,
but that's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying that there were people that didn't squeal and deny Christ.
I'm saying in Rome. I'm saying if we're assuming Peter and Paul got crucified in Rome, a lot of people scholars agree with this. You're saying that you think that they had a choice to get out of it. How do you know they had a choice to get out of it? We have no idea.
Paul says that Agabus warned him not to go to Jerusalem, and he went anyway.
Paul
didn't know he was going to die.
Well, Paul had a pretty good idea. Paul had a pretty good idea he was going to die.
He didn't say that.
I mean, hold on. Paul had a pretty good idea he was going to die. I mean, I don't think that's really even disputed. I mean, Nero was not exactly known for his niceties. I mean, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I really think that's kind of like a minor thing to get hung up on. If we're going to debate whether or not Paul thought he was going to die, I think if you're going to go argue in front of Nero after being arrested for your religious beliefs, you probably have a pretty idea you're going to get fucking murked. And I'm pretty sure you got beheaded, not crucified. I know Peter got crucified.
Why would you think that? On what?
Based off what? I think there's pretty historical evidence that he got beheaded. Like, there's like a lot of people.
The Romans don't just kill people for their religions out of nowhere. They're usually
they didn't kill it. They didn't kill it out of nowhere. They thought that he was going to possibly be like leading a religious rebellion. Would be the argument that I've read most of the time. Right. Even though I would, but
exactly. You don't know if they had a.
So choice. You agree? Well, I'm not saying they have a choice. I'm just arguing that Nero existed, Paul existed, and those are also proof that Bible is historical.
If he got executed by Nero, you're saying that he could have got out of it by just confessing it's all false. You have no idea.
I'm not saying that, for the record. I'm not saying
that. Doug was saying that. You said he died for something he didn't believe. How do you know that he at the last second he wasn't like, okay, let me go? You have no idea. We can't get to that. It's all just Christian stories from the 2nd century.
It would be completely inconsistent with everything he ever said his whole life about enduring to the end, about running the race, about everything else for him to squeal at knife point. He was in jail. He was shipwrecked.
You don't know that,
all
though.
Kinds of stuff.
All I'm saying.
He was flogged twice. And then at the last second, after all of that, he's going to squeal. It's not consistent with his character.
You don't know what the circumstances was for his execution. You're making it seem like he had no choice, but he had a choice to get out of it. We don't know that.
I'm arguing that it would be inconsistent for his character and everything he said and wrote and believed and the way he lived to squeal at the last minute. That's entirely hyperbole.
It's pretty weird.
And why did you leave out Josephus and Tacitus?
I'm talking about Christian writers, Christians themselves. I'm not talking about primary sources.
Okay, so
Josephus is 96 AD.
You're arguing that we don't have anybody else corroborating this.
This is after Pliny the Younger.
Josephus is only mentioned on a rock, and yet there's all these other sources that you just.
Josephus is after the Gospels, dude. It's all after the Gospels. Of course, Josephus knows about this story. It's 96 AD.
What, he doesn't count because he wasn't there? History, no historian can write.
He was born in 37.
Watched it.
Josephus is born in 37, dude. So there's no primary witnesses to this stuff. That's what I'm saying.
You have just with a brush of your hand eliminated every historian ever.
Yeah.
He doesn't even know the name of Jesus. He calls him Christus.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty bad point, though. Like, I think he's actually right about this, because in that case, once again, coming back to Troy, we know Herodotus and Plato both wrote about Troy, like, in depth, and we're sitting here talking about this, and neither one of those, that's thousands of years after Troy. Like, we could look to a lot of historians where they see these cities existed based off of, oral traditions, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I would argue, I'm going to say something pretty crazy here, that Atlantis, in some capacity, probably existed in some way, right? It's maybe not in the way they had fucking nukes and whatever, but there's probably, if we go and find it, there will probably eventually find some sort of archaeological evidence for the sea people that lead from Atlantis or whatever, and maybe it's in the Irish, maybe it's like in a different sea. But like, I would argue once again that these are all examples every time we find these old cities of the Bible or these other myths having historical basis in reality. And I think that's the real crux of this issue. Y'all are saying there's no basis. I'm saying that this is actually how we determine our history, is we look at the myths and then we find the archaeological evidence to support why they believe these things, like Sodom and Gomorrah, like the Noah's Ark, like these other examples, right? When you go and you find these things and go, okay, this may or may not exist, this may or may not inspire this. And when you're saying, oh, this doesn't happen at all, I would like to respond to that one tweet of the one super chat. He goes, oh, Gibbs, well, how is this not shared stories worldwide? Well, this is why I keep bringing up the North American and South American creation myths, or not creation myths, flood myths, because these are myths that predate the Columbus arrival, right? This predates maybe not in all these cases, but most of these predate even like Viking arrival, right? Vinland used to be a myth. People didn't think Vinland actually existed. People thought it was just like something that was right. And then we found it, right? This is over and over and over again. We find this over and over throughout history where we like have these mythical cities, mythical things, and then they find them, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's what this is, and it's based in history. And if you're going to argue that this is not historically accurate to the like perfect letter, sure, I might agree with you. But this is the problem with what Hunter and Gnostic are saying, is they're saying, oh, well, since there's some discrepancy between like Luke and John says he's the most beloved of all the disciples, and none of the others ever say that. Oh, we got to throw it out the window because there's a discrepancy. When I'm saying that's ridiculous, because we can look at all sorts of historical accounts from the same events, and there's always discrepancies between two historical accounts, especially if one's written by a loser of a battle and the other's written by a winner. I think that's a fair thing.
I have two points against this. The first is I feel really weird about the historical examples that you've been giving. First off, it seems like the Troy thing. I'm not going to really touch on the Troy thing, but it seems a little bit unclear if that was really ever a myth. But I will touch on the Atlantis thing, which you brought up. That's been a myth from the beginning. We actually know where that originated from. That was Plato. That was in the Republic.
Right? Where did he find that from?
No. He made it up. It was and not just he made it up. It's like it was written down as an allegory of like a failed nation. And he's like, what? Like imagine a world, right? It's not like he's claiming that it's a myth.
No, he gets it from Solon. That's not true. He gets that from Solon. Solon
primary sources don't mention it though. He says it's from Solon, but the primary sources we have from Solon never mention this. The first time it's ever mentioned in the primary sources is Plato. Hunter is absolutely right about that.
Once again, I mean, let's just say it doesn't exist at all. That's fine.
I'm going to say the second thing that I have to say, which is it feels very interesting that the two Christians on the panel have very different ideas of what Christianity is, and I think that that's kind of the weird thing about Christianity is it seems like everyone has this like they're like no, the Bible. It's this truth of God, and everyone can stem from it. But it is interesting that everyone has their different flavors, and I want to point to something, which is. Gibbs is saying, look, there's subjective narratives, and of course they're going to have discrepancies between each other. But I think Uncle Doug would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Uncle Doug would say something like, it is infallible, that there is truth to this, and that truth is the word of God. It's not just that it's from corroborators of a story, but those corroborators are being filtered through what God wants us to know. Is that correct?
Give or take, close enough.
Okay, so it feels weird when you're saying these are the objective standards. This all comes from the mouth of God, and there would still be discrepancies. I get Gibbs' point, which is like these are different. Sure, you're going to mix up midday when specifically Jesus died. I get that, I guess. Maybe. I don't even know if I can see that point. But to Uncle Doug, how could there be discrepancies if it is the word of God?
Because people.
Okay.
You look, a court case last month may have come to the judgment that the guy was guilty. But that doesn't mean all the eyewitnesses were perfectly in agreement on every detail.
So do you think
that it exactly represented how guilty he was or what was in his mind when he did it?
Sure.
And that's just that's not ancient history transcribed over and over from lots of sources or whatever. Like it or not, God has to work through with us, and we're the ones that describe for us the mind of Christ. And my argument, mind of God, my argument is we are ants in an ant farm looking at a giant face looking in, telling everybody we know what he had for lunch. And that's stupid, and that's religion.
Why
be so dogmatic about it?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
But there's also thousands and thousands of Hindu gods. There's all kinds of Buddhists. There's all kinds of whatever, because there's all kinds of people that are full of pride and think they know best and that their opinion trumps everything and everybody. And that's just the human condition.
So why wouldn't you agree that it's at least a possibility that when the Catholic Church had like sole possession over the Bible, that they would be able to rewrite it?
That never happened. There was Ethiopian Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox.
They're part of the same church, though.
Lots of people had canons. Lots of people had scripture.
Sure, but there was no ability ever to rewrite
it.
The
Gnostics. There's another one.
What ability to rewrite what?
Rewrite the Bible. No. If you acknowledge that people are infallible and that God has to work through us, why then treat the Bible as infallible when it's been handled by humans for 6,000 years?
Well, for one, we have corroborating evidence. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls, and for a long time we thought that
those also have discrepancies.
We thought
thousands of discrepancies.
I don't get it. Like, I genuinely don't get it.
There are texts like the Book of Enoch in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon that everybody thought was twisted and made up, and it wasn't right. And then we find it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, accurately depicting what's in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon.
That's not what happened. That's not what the church says about Enoch. They actually cite the Book of Jude cites Enoch and quotes it word for word. It's in the New Testament. They just thought that the authorship was dubious and it was a Hellenistic text, so they didn't include it in canon. They still the Enoch was still passed around in Greek sources and was still preserved in different versions.
And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have confirmation that the one in the Ethiopian Orthodox was accurate. There are others that are doctored up. There were others that were fiddled with.
So
we have so many different early fragments that we can compare and see, okay, that was added later. That doesn't belong.
Right.
Or whatever.
Sure, but wait, okay.
More than any other history events.
I think you're maybe dodging my question, and maybe I can reframe it just to make sure that I'm really honing in on it.
The Bible is
why couldn't I say
wanted it to be?
No. Right. You keep saying that, and that feels confusing because you also acknowledge that humans are infallible and they're passing through their hands. So here's my question. I'm going to frame my question specifically like this. Couldn't I make the argument that God spoke to Moses and Moses actually misunderstood because he's a fallible human, and God was trying to tell a metaphorical story about how the world came to be, and Moses, like an idiot, because he's a dumb human, he wrote, "Oh, got it. So it was made in a week," right? And he wrote it down like an idiot, even though God explained it to him. Why couldn't that?
Totally could.
That happen? Okay.
And
so it
God
feels
would have known that that's how Moses was going to take it, and God would have known that that's how Moses would have.
So why does God allow the discrepancies in the Bible in the New the New Testament, for example?
So you have a reason
we have
to give him
competing
the finger.
Sorry.
So you have a reason to give him the finger.
What?
This is so motivated. It's so like
look.
you start at your conclusion.
There's
It's so ad hoc.
I don't know. You can go through the text, go through the Bible. There's lots of places where he says, "I'm not going to give them ears to hear."
I agree.
I'm going to say it in riddles so that they will disagree. He sends prophets that are funny looking, that you want to cut in half, that wear leather,
bald.
whatever, that call people to repent, and it's easy to dismiss them.
So why
would churches look?
We've met a few of them this week.
There's churches I can't go to because I have a ponytail.
Let me ask you a question, Hunter, because you
have a beard.
Okay.
You brought up the bald thing.
Denominations of Christians.
I did bring.
No, I just want to ask you a question, Hunter.
Story when I read the
yeah, it's a good story. I like the Ehud story personally. You know,
that one's great. The left-handed fucking.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. But like,
yeah,
it's a good story, right? Like, yeah, if you don't know that story, I
favorites.
highly recommend it. It's a good one. But like, so the bald one, right? Like, okay, let's just say hypothetically, I'm bald, right? And I'm bald, and you make fun of me, and then like the next week, all of a sudden, you get killed by some bears. Mm-hmm. Now, like, would you say that if I'm like, the religious leader of my thing, in my community, and I happen to be bald, and then you got eaten by a bear in the wilderness, or your kids did or whatever, that I would probably attribute that in the fucking ancient days to like, of course, God made it. Okay, so then you would argue it's not unrealistic for the idea back when they were like had way more wild animals. We know there were lions in Europe, for example, but there are no lions now. That the lions ate people in Europe back in the day.
I want to pause. I want to pause you real quick. I want to make clear my stance. Maybe Gnostic disagrees with me on this. I do believe that almost all of the authors of the Bible were earnest, that they genuinely believed that Jesus was God, when we're talking specifically about the New Testament, or that the prophet really did this, or that the prophet really did that. I do believe that there are, for the most part, I'm really looking, and I really know the New Testament more than the Old Testament. I do believe they're earnest. I also think they're wrong. So like,
but let me just add to that, because the New Testament is trying to tie itself to the Old Testament for the prophets, for example, the suffering servant, Isaac carrying his cross, carrying his wood to his own sacrifice. They're trying to use motifs from the Old Testament to apply to Jesus. So there has to be some creative level going on here.
Absolutely. The means justify the ends. A really good example is the flee to Egypt, that like Matthew invokes this Moses parallel to Jesus, even though Luke has a completely different story. It seems like they're motivated into claiming that they're definitely motivated writers.
So it's beyond just historical. This is what happened.
Yes, they believe God, Jesus is God. So I'm going to essentially flub some details a little bit,
okay, I agree
just to
that.
ensure that those.
So you don't believe the Romans crucified people?
No, of course I do.
And Psalm 22. Where it says, "My bones are out of joint. They pierced my hands. They cast lots for my clothes."
I believe that Jesus was crucified.
Hold on. Do you know what? You want to know why? You know what that psalm's about? King Josiah was pierced and killed by a war that between the Hittites, the Egyptians were surrounding him like lions, like a pack of animals. Israel was surrounded, and
so it's prophecy.
Josiah was pierced and killed. This was written in the Psalms, and Isaiah wrote about it. Now this gets applied to Jesus later, but the original context was about King Josiah, who was an anointed king.
So it's prophecy.
That's that they're writing about. They're not writing about prophecy at that point. That psalm is about Josiah. It becomes a prophetic text later by the process of what do they call it when when they rewrite the stories into prophecy. You know what I'm talking about, right?
So it didn't apply to Jesus.
Not first, not the original author.
So what's the difference? But God can multitask and say one thing and mean two things, and somehow
you can just say it's God then. But I'm telling you, the author had an original purpose to write about King Josiah being pierced and killed during a time when Israel was surrounded by their enemies.
And David wrote a bunch of the Psalms that sounded like what he was praying and what he was going through that also applied a lot to Jesus.
No, this actually
he didn't know he was prophesying. He's just writing a lament about what he's going through. But
then we don't have free will. Then we don't have free will. This is all just a simulation. It's all planned from day one. That's basically what you're saying.
Not really, but we don't have a word big enough.
That's a big debate in of itself, right there. Free will versus like predestination. But I don't think that's what we're talking about today.
We agree that there are people that think the moon landing was fake.
Yes.
We agree that there's people that think the Earth is flat.
Yes.
Even if they were a majority of people, that wouldn't make them right.
Correct.
So an appeal to how many people or how many scientists or how many whatever
stop
doesn't win a point just because they believe something. Charles Darwin said, if my theory is right, we're going to find lots and lots of fossils of in between cats and dogs or whales and people. And we don't find those. They should be disproportionately way more than the fixed ones we find now.
Hold on.
I actually brought that up. A little bit ago. We didn't really dive into it, so that's a good example. Like I believe evolution is probably like a fundamentally sound theory, right? We see examples of microevolution over time, readily, right? And we don't see the macro, or we haven't at least found the large macroevolution to the extent that people. Okay, can you get give me an example of we see it over time. I think the micro, we know that whales were originally land animals, right? And we see the evolution from the original animal, but we don't see I don't know, fucking the rat from that list that used to live in the Cretaceous turning into a monkey. We don't see that. And I'm sure
we have a pretty strong.
Hold on, let me finish. Well, hold on, let me just finish. And the reason for that is probably because the way fossilization works is you have to meet a very certain criteria for it to fossilize, and it's very unlikely that every single one of these large step kind of fucking evolution things met the criteria or was in a place where they could get fossilized, whether it be a tar pit, whether it be fat frost or freezing, hold on. No, I'm not wrong. I mean, I'm actually arguing on your side on this point. But my point is there criteria that you have to meet for something to fossilize, right? You have to either be in a region, you have to be flash frozen, and so a lot of these cases, since they didn't meet this criteria, we're not going to find it. However, I don't think that disproves evolution as a whole, right? I also don't think that makes me not a Christian, because I believe that evolution works because God works in mysterious ways. If you had the power to make a self-sustaining environment, then evolution is probably by His hand, right? And I don't see that is against my Christian beliefs, in any former way. And I think that this is kind of when you say what is literal, and we talk about what is real history. I think that you have to once again look at what this is overall. And whenever I can point to multiple examples from the Bible, and then we find historical evidence of something similar or something almost identical, or yada yada yada, then it just proves that the Bible does exist in a historical capacity. How many times we looked up someplace and we gone and dug there, and they find evidence of archaeological evidence of people living there and being there in this time period over and over and over again. I don't know. Are you disputing that?
I think that you're equivocating here on what specifically we mean when we say that Bible is true. And like I've said, I would concede a fair bit of historicity when it comes to the Bible. Not a fair bit, but certainly a meaningful percentage. I would definitely say that Jesus was a figure. He was crucified. I would definitely say that there was likely a regional flood in the region. I would probably agree with your assertion that Sodom and Gomorrah, probably that those were real cities and they probably got destroyed. whether it was a fucking avalanche or whatever. I don't know. But like, I agree with all of these points, but that is not the conversation we are having today. That is a reasonable, fair interpretation of the Bible, but that is not the conversation we're having. We're saying, is it historical? All of the claims, including like that Jesus rose from the dead. That's a big one. That's one that I thought we were going to be focusing on today. That Methuselah was 950 years old. Whatever. I could go down the list of all of the different historical claims. And I think, Gibbs, you would probably say that those are metaphorical, which again, sounds like you're just a Christian who's on our side. And sorry that this actually is end up being a 4v1.
No, that just means that you're on my side because I am just like an intelligent.
But you're not with Uncle Doug.
All right, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. I see your thing backstage, Gnostic. I'm going to bring that up in a second. We're going to wrap this up in about 5 minutes. So try to get to the end of this talking point. We're not going to start any more new points. And then we will do closing thoughts. And then, of course, we will open up the panel for Q&A. If you are interested in joining the open panel, keep an eye out on the live chat. I will be dropping that link into the live chat for you to click and head backstage. Okay, Gnostic, go ahead to here.
So real quick, I just wanted to, this is just a quick little, to go back to what you said about evolution, there are actual peer review articles. I mean, talking about evolution 101 here, showing transitional fossils. They do exist. That's this idea that there's no transitional fossils is just not true. But I wanted to, the thing I really wanted to talk about real quick is this idea of people writing prophecy about Jesus and not knowing this. I mean, so one of the major ones is about this anointed that will be cut down. Coming from Daniel. But when you a lot of times people take the quote out of context, say, oh, an anointed will be cut down. It's about Jesus because Jesus is anointed. He's the Messiah. But if you actually read what's going on here, it talks about a ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt, streets in a trench. In the times of trouble, the anointed will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come to destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will come, and the desolations have been decreed. He will confirm a covenant for many. Middle of the 7. He will put an end to sacrifice and offering. Like this is Jesus didn't do any of this stuff. This is about Antiochus the 4th and around 163 or 170 BC, something like that. And there's clear context. You can keep going to the next chapter where it actually describes the abomination of desolation happening here. So there's clear context being written in these sources. We know what they're actually about, and Jesus does not match up to what the author is actually saying. There's only a few lines that people later took and apply it to Jesus because he's because they call him an anointed one. So here's the one that says right here about the abomination of desolation. Where is it? Am I in the right spot? Anyways, yeah, you get my point. You get my point.
Jesus caused the sacrifices to cease.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't. The sacrifice kept going until 70 AD.
It was never received. In the Jewish temple.
What?
Listen to me. On Yom Kippur, they picked 2 rams. They cast lots. One is the Azazel, is the sins of the nation are imputed to him and is sent off into the wilderness to die. The other one, the blood is sprinkled in the Holy of Holies. The priests take a white cord that's dyed red. They tie it around the Azazel and lead it off into the wilderness. If that cord, that piece that they left in the temple turns white, then God accepted the sacrifice. The Jewish rabbinical text says after the curtain was torn and the death of Jesus,
that's not true at all.
Cord never turned white again.
You're full of shit, dude. That's not true at all. Show me your primary source.
Jewish writings.
That's not true at all. Did you show me the Talmud? That's not true. No, I've never heard that in my entire life. You're the first person to ever say that. That's bullshit. Show me a source. That's not true.
Quote the rabbinical text because that does feel very insane. That the Jewish rabbinical text would confirm the idea that Jesus was the Messiah.
And he said, "I'm going to tear this temple down, And in 70, he caused the
You are delusional. Sorry, this is delusional. That is not true. The sacrifices continued all the way till 70, and then only stopped because the Romans sacked them and destroyed their temple. It had nothing to do with Jesus. The Gospels were all written after this.
What the text says, the ruler's going to come and destroy it.
I'd love to see a source on that because that feels very surprising to me.
It's not. It doesn't exist. Can you pull it up?
Let me fucking.
Yeah.
Just let me give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
I don't even believe it.
Pull it up. But but anyways, Daniel even describes who this is going to be that's going to take away the sacrifices. He mentions him coming from the third kingdom, which is the Greeks. So he gives us so much context about why it's Antiochus IV, and then he says that this ruler will be he gives all the details. He'll set up an abomination inside the temple. The Romans never did that. Did Titus Caesar go in the temple and set up an abomination? No, that's what Antiochus IV did. So there's all these details in Daniel that have nothing to do with what happened in Jesus' time. And also another thing is like it says that the anointed will be cut down during the time when this is going on, not 70, 60 years, whatever, 40 years later after Jesus dies. There's no 40 years in there. So what happens is Christians are going, the authors of the gospel, maybe even after this, are going through the Old Testament and they're kind of cherry picking verses and applying it to Jesus. And it doesn't match. It never fits perfectly. It's always something really cherry picked. Anyways, did you find that verse?
Yeah, he posted it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's in the private chat.
Okay.
So what? From the Babylonian Talmud, what passage? Just says from the Babylonian Talmud. 40 years before the destruction of the temple, the lot for the Lord did not come up to the right hand. The scarlet thread did not turn white. The western lamp did not stay lit, and the doors of the temple opened up by themselves. So you're saying this is the end of the sacrifice? Where is the sacrifice ending?
God stopped accepting it.
That's not true. The sacrifice kept going till 70 AD.
What's the point if God's not accepting it?
How do you know God's not accepting it?
Because the cord didn't change. Because that's the evidence that he accepts it. The crimson cord turns white. Supernaturally, over and over, it turned white. Over and over and over, it turned white.
Where does it say this? Where does it say this?
Right there in the thing, it said it stopped turning white. Before that, it was turning white.
First of all, no, it doesn't say that. You didn't even give me a passage.
I'm looking. Looking.
And it says the lot for the Lord did not come up in the right hand. The scarlet thread did not turn white. The western lamp did not stay lit, and the doors of the temple opened up by themselves.
Did you take all that time just to type into the side what you had just said? Only put from the Talmud.
I'm trying to find out. You just wrote Babylonian Talmud, and then this is what it says. I don't know what passage this is, and
I'm looking it up.
Okay.
AI Overview just says this passage is a direct quote from the Talmud, specifically in the tractates Yoma 39b and Rosh Hashanah 31b. It describes a series of ominous events that reportedly occurred for 40 years leading up to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. Maybe that's something
for the record, the AI Overview just quoted where to find it, by the way, if you read that part again. But that's not a huge thing.
So we're talking Yoma 6:8 Mishnah describes the ritual. Yoma 39b. Which one is it? Yoma 39? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
All right, let's look this up.
While we're waiting, since I know that Hunter wanted to argue this is not a new argument, but this kind of goes to my my whole point about history being interpreted a certain way. I'm going to tell you all a little case. Now, this isn't going to be a one-to-one example of Jesus because this man wasn't crucified, but Clarvarius Narcisse was a Haitian man pronounced dead in 1962 by a bunch of American doctors. And then he came back in 1980. They came back to life, allegedly, and he was apparently caught by some voodoo priestess that made him into a zombie. And they brought him back, and he came back. And then what we found out was later. Hold on. What we found out later was potentially, they're not 100% sure about how this happened, but I think maybe it has something to do with pufferfish poison that like made him go to sleep and everybody think he was dead and he came back to life. And my point is, once again, Osiris is a good example of this. Dionysus is another good example. These are archetypes or types of pre-Jesus characters that rose from the dead and then interceded on behalf of their people for the underworld. And we see this over and over and over again. So it's not a crazy stretch to me for somebody to think, oh, Jesus actually came back to life, because there's potentially ways that we can see mythological examples. And we even have a modern example. And I specifically chose a modern example from the 60s to 80s where we have someone that was confirmed dead by American doctors and still came back. I mean, so what y'all are saying, it could be historically true that he came back to life. We don't have the scientific explanation for why they think he was dead and he came back. Maybe the Romans didn't do a good enough job. Maybe he somehow healed in this 3 days because he was basically a Super Saiyan. I don't know, but the point is that things seem to be like a recurring theme where hey, we point to history, we point to myth, and then we can find historical examples of where this seems to occur. And y'all really haven't disputed that. Y'all just said, oh, everything in the Bible is not 100% true, then it's all bad, which is, I think, ludicrous and ridiculous.
I think that's
the big problem is that the case that you're laying out would also apply to any good fiction written. So a good fiction is going to have things that the reader can associate with being as true and that they're able to identify with in order to make the book feel good and be popular, be captivating.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, and the problem is a lot of the missing pieces are the main fucking pieces. It's the other things this city's mentioned and they found this city. That's all fine and dandy. That's something that any author would do.
Before we forget about what was just said, because that was a huge claim, the Talmud is not saying that this doesn't even mention sacrifices. It's saying that they had omens that the end of their temple was coming. It does say 40 years prior. That's an interesting point. I'll concede that. We're talking right around this time. But it doesn't say anything about sacrifices no longer being accepted. It doesn't even mention sacrifices. It doesn't say Jesus is the reason why sacrifices ended.
Did you have this back? You want me to bring this up, Gnostic?
What?
Your backstage?
Oh, yeah. I'll just show in the actual passage. The sages taught during the time of God. It occurred occasionally. During the 40 years prior to the destruction, a lot for God did not raise. The high priest. So occasionally they would get these omens, and the western lamp of the candle did not burn continually. And they explain it. They say that this is a prophecy concerning the temple. Where is it? Just as the forest of Lebanon, just as the forest blooms, the temple blooms. When Solomon built the temple, he planted it in all kinds of sweet fruit. So they're talking about the temple, the doom of the temple. This is probably nonsense too. But
sure, it's still obviously ideologically motivated.
Exactly. You got a bunch of Jewish priests saying, we knew that the temple was going to just be destroyed. We got all these omens.
We got the omens for sure. Yeah.
So what's your explanation for how a crimson cord turns white sometimes?
I don't think that actually happened.
I think it's ideologically motivated.
Yeah. And you weren't an eyewitness, so we can't listen to you.
Neither were you. So neither were you. That's a stupid argument.
I didn't claim to be. I claim to know Jesus personally.
Okay.
And the difference between Christians, the Bible says that on primary things, Christ and him crucified, we have unity. On everything else, we show grace. I don't have to agree with Gibbs for Christianity to be right. We can disagree on whatever, broccoli or the moon landing or whatever. That doesn't change Christ and him crucified. And my faith is not in the Bible. The Bible didn't die on a cross for me. My faith is who I know, who is my Lord, who is a man of color that I'm a bondservant to and serve every day.
Interesting.
So
that's a
but
good
the
note.
debate was about the Bible. And
that's a good note to end on. Thank you, Uncle Doug. Let's actually maneuver into our closing statements. I'm going to let's see, Gibbs, you ended on the last round, so we'll start with Gibbs, then Doug, then Hunter, Ben, and then Gnostic. You'll have the final word, okay? Mr. Gibbs, if you could, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think my point here is that the Bible is a historical. The Bible is a historical document that we can use to prove history in multiple aspects. I would argue that once again, history is written by the victors, whether that's the victors through other way, military, whether it's the victors through culture, whether that's the victors through numerous other ways. And so I would like to say, like, once again, we can go look at all these historical sources, and we find similar sources in places like the New World, where they didn't have a way to contact these people over here in the Middle East or whatever, and they have the same biblical stories like the flood, and they're very similar. They have overlapping themes. Maybe not every one of them is the exact same. Some are very similar, though. We have similar names from like societies that have different phonetic productions. Like we have like all sorts of examples where these stories overlap. We have examples like in China where it's similar. We have all these different things, and then we look at history. We do archaeological digs. We find these places over and over and over and over and over again. I would argue that this is based in history. Would I argue that maybe it's metaphorical, maybe it's allegorical, maybe it's all these different things? That's really not the point. The point is that it is based in history. All religion and really spirituality and even science is just the human trying to understand what they don't understand, right? This is history. This is kind of the key thing. And so when y'all are sitting here dismissing these out of hand, you go, oh, dumb Christians, 6,000 years. Sure, some people are fundamentalists. We got fundamentalists of every religion. I'm not one of those people. I believe in Christianity. I believe Jesus saved me and died for sins, all that good jazz. But at the same time, I think there's plenty of evidence to point to lots of historical figures. We have Herod the Great. We have Herod the guy, well, I can't think of the last name, with an A. We have all these other people that we can point to that existed in the Bible. The Hittites, they were argued not even be an existing thing for a while, and then they find the archaeological evidence of them. Same with Troy. Troy was argued not to exist. We can argue about whether or not that's a real thing, but over and over and over and over, we find examples of hit cities and other places that happened, right? Like where these things are over and over told, and then nobody believed them, and then we find the archaeological evidence for it. And then, like I said, we brought up Gobekli Tepe, and once again, I think this goes back to my overall kind of creation. It's amazing how these people on the other side have pointed to these things to say this disproves something, then use it as the same example when I've already used this, going, okay, this proves a creation myth, a flood myth. Gobekli Tepe talks about a flood myth potentially. That's one of the things they argue might be a thing, right, as well. So like we're seeing all these examples of unexplained history that can only be explained by going back and looking at the mythology of these societies, whether that's Christian, whether that's Norse, whether that's Muslim, whether that's Chinese, all these different things. And I think this is important because I think not every religion, maybe not the Jedi and the Sith, I don't know, like in Australia, but I think the rest of the religion, most religions have some sort of basis in reality. And I think to argue that it's not historic history is ridiculous and really just unfounded, and like it's just kind of like a bash on Christians as a whole, which is a problem.
Thank you, Gibbs. Uncle Doug, to you, please.
None of this is new. There are all kinds of reasons why. I read a story. I'm working on details out of memory here, and my hard drive isn't as fast as it used to be. But there were a team of archaeologists that found a city. All the non-Christians were interested in it. The one Christian guy said, "This is Jericho. There's 30-foot walls that fell outward. The Bible says they ran up into the city. This is exactly where Jericho should be." The non-Christian says, no, Jericho doesn't exist. It can't be Jericho. Crucified him, ran him completely out, questioned his credentials, ran him completely out of the science. Until later, turns out, yeah, you know what, it was Jericho. There's all kinds of reasons why people don't want to believe God, don't want to believe, want to find any possible reason. And I think it comes down to wanting to run your own life instead of let somebody else run it. Odin isn't telling you what to do. Jesus is. If you're really going to believe in Jesus, then you're going to do what he says to do. And a lot of people just don't want to, especially in America. Most of the people say they're Christians aren't. They look just like everybody else. And so my basis for faith in the Bible isn't the archaeology or the agreement of all the names. It's because it's true to me. Because God has shown himself to me over and over and over, more than I can tell you, more supernatural stuff. I've called strangers by name. I've seen people instantly healed. The Bible is true because God is true. And like I said, because, demons don't run when I invoke Thor or Odin or somebody else, Krishna. Anyway, so I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Have you ever tried?
Oh, hold on. It's closing.
Yeah, I tried. I pray, Sarah, that God would bless your show. And I pray that everybody watching would find truth, the real capital T truth, not just whatever's true to you. everybody has their own truth, but there is a big capital T truth in the universe.
Perfect. Thank you, Uncle Doug. I appreciate that. Hunter, to you, please.
Hi. So I wrote something up. I'm fine with people like Gibbs's compatibilist approaches to Christianity. I have nothing against religious folks. My entire family's religious, and a lot of them have these ideas about how the mythologies aren't true literally, but they clearly speak to something true about the human condition. I make my peace with those Christians for sure. But one of the most interesting things about one of the most interesting things about fundamentalists like Doug, however, is that they seem to assert that they have to know that the Bible is true because God wouldn't let it be ruined. And how do we know that God exists? Well, it says so in the Bible. This is all still bypassing the whole issue, which is that the Bible has never asserted once that the Bible itself is infallible. Look, Uncle Doug, I'm not trying to stomp on your religion, but I think it's rather telling that you agree that there are discrepancies in the Bible, but they are only there to give people a reason not to believe it. Man, that is some motivated thinking if I've ever seen any. I'm Hunter Kozak. I make videos and do debates mostly on TikTok, but also I mostly talk about philosophy and linguistics and math and politics, not too much about religion. So if you're interested, give me a follow. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Hunter. Mr. Balderson, to you, please.
I think that I would have not gone as far as Neil, but I actually don't study in this area near as much as Neil. I actually enjoyed very much his take that the Old Testament is completely made up, and I would say obviously the New Testament was made up in order to quell the very savage Christians in Rome that were tearing apart his empire. And so one of the features of that's very drawing, and part of why it's proliferated so much, is the feature that you can be an awful person and still get the Willy Wonka pass as long as you're on Team Jesus, which takes in no personal accountability or any decency. Where Odinism, my actions on earth decide where my afterlife. So I can definitely see why weak people pick it, and there's a whole lot of weak people out there. And so the story caught on. It's a good story. Lots of good stories out there. Little Japanese kids know about the Marvel universe. Big deal. Good debate, guys.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Balderson. And Gnostic, final words from you, sir, and then we'll move into super chats and open panel.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. I just thought it was interesting. And Doug said, I pray this audience and panel finds truth, capital T. And then all in the same sentence says, I don't believe in the Bible because of archaeology and evidence. I believe in the Bible because God is true. So it's like, well, God is true because the Bible is true, and the Bible isn't true because of evidence. So I just thought that was interesting. I care about evidence. I care about what the facts on the ground, the data on the ground that we can touch, we can see, we can corroborate primary sources, that type of thing. And we didn't even get into the Exodus, for example, like millions of people leaving Egypt, all this culture leaving Egypt and going into the desert and leaving no trace behind, stuff like that. The flood happening only a couple of thousand years ago, and the whole world restarting, but somehow there's all these gigantic city-states in that time period, millions of people. Those are the things I'm concerned about, and I agree that some people wanted to make it's all symbolism. It's all just symbolism. It's all just allegory. But if that's the case, then is the New Testament also just allegory? Did Jesus die on the cross for a bunch of mythology and allegory? And is he also an allegory? So like, it's either true or it's not. And if it's not true, then why should I follow
it? All right, perfect. I've got an echo coming back from somewhere. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm officially dropping the StreamYard link into the live chat. If you would like to come up for Q&A, nice. Please feel free to start heading backstage now. We are going to read the super chats in the meantime and respond to them kindly. And then we'll bring you all up here in just a second. Gentlemen, because there are quite a few on here, I do ask for more concise and fairly short responses to them so that we can move through quite quickly. If you want to have a little back and forth with them, go for it. I'm all for it, but we still want to keep the timing limited. All right. Constellation says with the big 20 over on Gnostic Side says Noah's flood didn't happen. Ringwoodite in the mantle can only be released through volcanic means, resulting in the heat problem. People in a wooden barge could not survive this. Too much geological activity in a short period. This is shots fired over at the Christian team. Did anyone want to respond to that?
It was covered in pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, once again, I would point to the fact that there is floodness worldwide from cultures that couldn't meet each other, and they have very similar overlapping. I mean, honestly, you know what? I'm going to say something crazy. The Aztecs were right. Quetzalcoatl was Cortez. He was predicted. And you know what? I just like at this point, I don't know. Like, every myth is retold. History is cyclical.
Okay. Anyone else have a quick response to that?
I agree with you, Consolation.
All right. All right. Testicle Johnson, I love your name. And with the big 5 says, if Jesus is so great, then why is he dead? Checkmate, Theus.
I think that yeah, exactly. Like Christians don't believe he's dead. I don't know if you don't know this about Christians. He's kind of famously still living.
Fair enough. That's a perfectly good answer. I'll leave it at that. Constellation says, and with the big 50, along the science front, Jews and Christians share a fatal flaw. Mankind is dome 6,000 years old. Some 6,000 years old. Here in Texas, we have human activity way older and all over the planet. There's no way all of our dates are in gross error. 6,000 years is childish. Shots fired again over at the Christians. If anybody wants to go ahead, Dad.
I'm going to really recommend, Sarah, that you get Kent Hovind on here. He would love to have this conversation, and I'm sure Gnostic would love to tear him into little pieces.
Hell yeah.
And I just had him on my channel last week, and we had a good talk. And I know that he does this and would be thrilled to come and share his arguments about why the Earth is young.
Oh, all right. Somebody.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that. So that's not all Christians. Go ahead.
It's debate, right? I mean, you want opinions, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's really a one-on-one. That would be less of a panel, where this is the Seriously Saturday panel show. That would be a one-on-one with Neil.
Whatever works.
I'll be down for that.
No, you don't got to worry about me, Papa. Jesus got my back.
Somebody in the chat that knows me, send me a DM to remind me to hit up Kent for that one, please. Thank you. Smill Still, I like that name. That's funny. With the big 5, this is why we need folks like Neil, because of all the, is that lying Christians? Lying?
Lying, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe it's leaning.
Leaning.
What a waste of $5. I'm sorry, man.
I wouldn't mind some lean.
No one even knows what you're talking about.
Lean with it, rock with it. Constellation with the big 5 says the University of Iowa just debunked the latest claim of Noah's Ark. I feel sorry for people getting sucked into this nonsense. How dare you believe anything that has been debunked? Any thoughts to this?
I mean, show me the evidence, I guess.
What was their agenda? It always is. Who's it coming through? Why?
What if they didn't have an agenda? What if they actually wanted to do an analysis?
Then that would be part of finding out who they are, right?
Sure. University of Iowa. No, you don't have to accept it.
It wasn't the University of Iowa.
That's what he says.
The university didn't do a study. Somebody at the university.
That's what I'm saying.
Did a study and put the university's name on it.
That's what he's saying. He's saying University of Iowa.
Anybody.
Well, probably a professor with a PhD.
You can't test evidence unless you know who's behind it and what their point is. If they have an agenda or not. Maybe they don't.
Science doesn't care about your agenda. Well, either you can produce results or you can't.
Oh, science doesn't have an agenda.
That seems like a little bit of a broad stroke. I don't agree with that.
Take more COVID pills, buddy.
You can have an agenda. You can produce or you don't.
No. But you could reproduce false, like some pretty falsifying evidence. That famously scientists and oil companies produced a paper that said, no. Like, I agree with you. This is why we look at the consensus of scientists and we don't just look at individual papers.
Sure.
Well, oil companies never did anything wrong with their science. Don't lie.
That's what I just said.
If I selectively ask only women about men's problems, there's definitely an agenda there. Dragon Fist with a big 5 says Gibbs is talking about the Durupiner formation. He didn't make it up. You didn't make shit up, Gibbs.
I know, and once again, I'll point out another example that we all thought was bullshit. This is from 1525. Francisco de Orellana. Whenever he traveled down the Amazon, he pointed out there was tons of cities with huge populations, and now and everybody thought he was crazy because nobody could find him. And now they've used LiDAR, and they found many of these cities actually did exist in the Amazon, and we think that there's able to hold a larger population of several million. Wait, are you disagreeing with the LiDAR in the Amazon finds? Okay. So, okay.
The scholars are laughing at that stuff right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
None of it's
Dragon Fist is actually backstage, so he'll be able to come back up his claims here on the super chat. Lithia says, "Good on you, Gnostic Informant. This is good practice for you to learn restraint and patience."
I failed.
Yeah, that must have happened at the beginning of the debate.
Yeah, I did not pass that test.
We'll work through it, Gnostic. Yeah. We'll work through it. It's okay. We got plenty more. It sounds like we got another debate coming up for you.
Those are fruits of the spirit in the Bible.
Ooh. Gypsy says, "For putting on an amazing debate, man. Charging you $10 for allowing me to listen to that man and making me dumber. This is all your fault."
Who's he talking about?
Gnostic. It must be Gnostic.
Yeah.
Well, this one came in over on your side, Gnostic. So he's blaming you for making him have to listen to supposedly dumb people. Constellation says, "Hearing this debate makes me feel good. I'm a man of physics and follow the data. The Christians here are suffering cognitive dissonance. I haven't even brought up the flat earth and dome cosmology. The Bible fails." Constellation has a lot to say. You can say it over on my side too.
Neither one of those are in the Bible.
The
flat earth and dome. That's people see it what they want to see.
The firmament is the dome, and the flat earth is the earth with clay with as a seal stamped into clay.
Yeah, it says it's held up by pillars in some passages.
Ezekiel, I have a picture of Ezekiel's vision from the 1500s, and it's absolutely a flat disc held up on pillars with a dome, and it's actually polar rather than solar because God sits in the top. And the Polaris is there, and the other stars move around him, and the sun and moon are inside of that.
And there's plenty of other verses that don't describe it that way.
Mm-hmm.
People pick and choose. They're flat earthers. If they're flat
I agree. There are discrepancies in people pick and choose the things that they want from the Bible. I 100%.
Well, hold on. We had an example that right here just happened. I brought up the LiDAR studies in South America. I just posted 3 articles, one from Science, one from the Smithsonian, and one from NASA. That's their actual original study. All of them confirming that LiDAR is confirmed. All sorts of fucking cities in South America, and these are actual serious people, and they're still denying it. So even when you provide evidence,
hold on.
LiDAR does not go underground.
Said that LiDAR produced results in the Giza pyramids. And then the actual
those are different things. It's not LiDAR.
Openings that they went to go verify those results, they were wrong.
You say there's all right, Balderson. So I see that Gnostics that say that. Are you saying that Francisco de Orellana, when he just said the story, that it was all a myth, and he just wrote it down in earnest, saying he saw these cities, and then when he do LiDAR studies, the Institute of Ecuador, NASA, and Science Magazine does all these different things, and they go and do it. You're saying that none of this is true, and it's all fake news, and we have three sources for it.
They put out sensational.
What about you, Hunter? Do you agree with it?
Wait, hold on. You guys are. Stop. I wanted to hear Ben. He was responding.
I'm saying they absolutely put out sensational news in order to draw attention to things to get funding. And then oftentimes those things aren't true. That my friend Jeffrey Drum, who's also we're trying to figure out a prompt for him, lives and just does nothing but study the pyramids in Giza and lives there. And absolutely the LiDAR in that they think things that they were saying underneath the pyramids, what could be verified was wrong. So why would we believe the things that can't be verified then?
They're fighting the literal cities in South America. I don't know why this is even really. I can't believe this is even a debate.
I feel like I'm being gaslit by both sides right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Wait, hold on. Is all Gibbs saying that one time there was a guy who went down a river and said, "Oh shit, there's cities there," and then
everybody said it was bullshit?
and then someone went down later, went, oh wait, shit, he was actually right the whole time. Of course that could have happened. Why is that so crazy that could have happened? To extrapolate that into the Bible being real feels like a crazy stretch. But of course, some mythologies can be confirmed. That's not a crazy leap to make.
But I'll tell you what the bullshit is. The bullshit is the scans aren't showing gigantic cities. It's showing like little structures here and there.
Okay, maybe.
People are extrapolating all this data that's not actually there.
Okay.
All right. Jim sends the big five. The ChatGPT bullies have met their match. Shame on you. Andy says, Gibbs, why do the similarities in flood stories prove that they are rooted in truth rather than prove that a story simply spread around the world?
Well, yeah, I kind of touched on this. A lot of these stories are like hundreds of years apart. They're also like different locations, thousands of miles. This is why I kept bringing up the New World. I brought up Hawaii. There's Polynesian similar myths. We have all these different examples over and over and over. What's that show? Everybody's seen it now, and I know I'm going to say it. People are laughing. That Graham Norton's bullshit. He posted ancient history. A lot of that shit is bullshit. Like he obviously spun it a way that it would be like exciting for Netflix. I agree with that. However, when I go, hey, let's go look at all these different examples, and then I point to examples like the Spanish from the 1500s, and now where they wrote this down. And the Spanish had one goal. It was to conquer the New World, get gold and shit. There's no reason for this guy to lie. In fact, he was arguing we should go back to these cities later and conquer them and get shit out of them. And when they couldn't find him, like, this guy was full of shit. And so when we're now discovering maybe he wasn't full of shit via LiDAR and archaeological evidence from multiple independent sources like Ecuador, like NASA, like all these things, I think it helps prove the Bible whenever you sit here and see, oh, there's some sort of like flood event that happened worldwide that all these different people have, and y'all are going, nah, dismissed. Like, and I think that's a little bit ridiculous. And like, especially if you're going to say that the world is older than 6,000 and older than 10,000, and then point to Göbekli Tepe and some of these other examples where we have these historical examples that we don't have evidence for why. I think the age of humans building structures is going further and further back. I don't know why that's going to be disputed.
Real quick, the LiDAR scans are showing structures that are from 600 CE and 300 BC. It's not going back to the pre-flood times. So your LiDAR scans that you're citing,
hold on, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying these are two comparable things.
Okay, my bad. I thought you were saying the same thing.
No, I was using the Spanish example.
Stop. Literally, you're all talking at once. Ben,
I didn't say anything.
Except for you, Hunter. You've been such a dull and little gem all night. Ben, I heard you say something. Gnostic, I heard you say something. Gibbs, I heard you say something. Doug, I don't know. Did you say anything? Okay. All right. Let's start with Ben, Gnostic, and Gibbs. You finish it out, and then we'll move forward.
You keep mixing up floods worldwide with a worldwide flood. The worldwide flood, again, would include everything, including the highest mountaintop, and only the people on the ark surviving it. And then you make it into this entirely different thing, which nobody's arguing that there's floods everywhere in the world.
Gnostic?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the scans thing, like, I'm not saying there's no truth to, there's no usage of these scans, and I know they're still being like you don't understand them that much as a new technology, but like from what I've gathered from experts I've talked to, it can only do so much. It can only like look at from the top bird's eye view. It can't really tell us what's below. And there is truth. There is some truth to the idea that they did discover structures in South America, but these structures were like from like 300 AD and 300 BC region. So
right. I actually don't dispute that. When I was the flood myth is a different point than the myth. The point that I'm making here, the point that I'm making now is there's a conquistador that went down the Amazon and he saw a bunch of cities, right? And Doug brought up, why did he do this? Well, they obviously wanted to conquer shit. And so when he came back and they couldn't find the cities, they called him crazy for 100 years. Now 500 years later, we're using LiDAR to discover, oh, this guy actually told the truth.
Of course that happened.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is this is a similar thing that happens throughout history. Is people will tell something, and then they'll say like either in earnest or in myth, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, that's bullshit. And then we go back and we use modern technology to prove it. And this is a different point than all these different societies having the flood myth. I feel like maybe that got confused in what I was saying there.
All right, last thought to Doug, then I'm moving to the next one.
I'd like to respond to Ben. Your argument that the flood had to be higher than Everest, and then your argument that there's oysters the size of your head on Everest because of tectonic shift. If the flood caused tectonic shift, then it could have been flatter before the flood, and created those mountains, not had to have been higher than those mountains to begin with.
The flood created tectonic shifts?
Absolutely would have.
Where do you think the tectonic plates are? They're below the ocean.
Let's put a pin in that. We'll save it for open panel. I'm 100% sure that's going to come up.
Not if the ocean was over your head.
Constellation says, Doug, I need Constellation to be a friend of mine too over here on this side of the Mater house. Doug didn't bring up the fact that the scientific community does not support human tracks in the Paluxy River. Cretaceous limestone also argues against. Plus, the museum there believes in a solid crystal dome cosmology. Completely ridiculous. All right, who's got the first thought?
Do I get any of that $50?
I know. I wish. I wish it was on my side.
YouTube didn't half of it. So there's only 25. There's only 25 left over from you after YouTube.
Yeah, Gnostic's getting all
Ain't
the
no
love
kidding
tonight.
about that. He ain't lying.
Yeah, they hit us pretty hard.
That's really all of them are bad like that. They take like huge percentage, and it's listen. That's what we need to get regulated, guys. We need to get the government to come in and regulate us streamers getting more money.
We're like little slaves, huh? We're little content slaves. All right, I want to hand it out to each one of you if you have something to add in on this. Let's start with Ben. Any thoughts?
No, that was pretty well stated. And I do. This guy must be on the Ken Ham thing with the dinosaurs on the ark and all that. That shit's hilarious.
Fair enough. Gnostic, any thoughts to you so far on this one?
I think Constellation's bringing fire tonight, dude. Couldn't agree more.
Should have had Constellation on the panel. Gibbs to you.
I don't know anything about that, so I can't speak to something I don't know about. So sure.
All right, Uncle Doug.
A Gnostic would probably say that what the reality matters and what people believe about a dome doesn't make any difference as to what's actually in the limestone. So you got to separate the beliefs of the museum from what's actually in the rock and really look at the actual facts, not people's opinion about the facts.
Sure.
Okay.
I do want to throw out that I think it's interesting how interested Doug is in motivated reasoning for historical evidence, but not maybe for biblical writers.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. Solar Knight says history does not exist other than a stubbornly persistent illusion. We all live with within a fast-moving time continuum within an ever-expanding universe. Why did he put a question mark at the end of that? Interesting. All right. Little Wing says, give a source from before the Brits arrived in Hawaii in the 1700s that Polynesian people in Hawaii had those stories. Also, the Polynesians could have picked up flood stories before leaving Southeast Asia. Gibbs, I'm going to let you answer this. We'll move forward.
Yeah, I mean, just look up the whole Lost Continent of Mu, and that's your Polynesian flood myth right there. And I think that there's probably plenty of evidence that there was some sort of flood in this region, whether or not it's what y'all want to call a biblical flood or not. I think that there's at least evidence of worldwide flooding where we have certain like lost continents per se. And when I say lost continent, I don't necessarily mean Atlantis that had nukes, but I do think there were probably societies in these areas that had to flee due to flooding and like whether it's tectonic change, whether it's the Younger Dryas. I think there's just too many stories that have overlap with similarities where these people had to leave. And there's plenty of evidence the Polynesians having similar stories to this that are pre-European contact. And also one other issue, Little Wing, that I can't really have, is you're going to hate this answer, is oral tradition is one of the biggest issues when we go and record Native Americans and some Polynesian, is because they use oral tradition passed down. And as we all know, it's like a game of telephone. Things, some change. But when you only have oral tradition, it's hard to actually like go and like prove this because they're, oral. They're not written down. And that's a major issue going forward. And so like, I know that's a cop-out up to some extent, but it is an issue that archaeologists and historians deal with on a regular basis.
Gibbs has issues with oral.
Let me tell you, that is not a problem.
I'm going to kind of run through these fives just for time consumption, and then we'll respond to the other ones. Dragon Fist says Gibbs is citing archaeological evidence, and you just keep saying he's not citing evidence because you are not familiar with it. Shots fired. Little Wing says ancient world trade does not prove the Abrahamic religions and the Yahweh God is true and real. Jim says myth is only seen as history to the civilizations that use them, but not from the outside. A Little Wing says, I agree with Richard Carrier and Adam Green. Jesus is myth created by Paul. I think we have someone who thinks Paul was not an apostle. That would be an interesting debate to kick into. J-Doc says Jesus is a complete literary construct from OT scripture and prophecies. Be sure to pick up a copy of the Jesus Deception. Ooh. Dragonfist says, Doug, you are holding your own for sure. Great job. I will be there for open panel, and I'm bringing evidence. Yes, he's sitting backstage. He's wet. He's ready. Little Wing says, Troy existing or Atlantis is a far cry from Jesus being God or the Abrahamic myths of Yahweh being true and real. Jim says, it's in Timaeus. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Timaeus.
Okay.
Timaeus. It's the Plato. This was a conversation about where specifically Atlantis was found.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
it's a Platonic dialogue.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. It's in Timaeus, which reads as a follow-up to the Republic. Thank you so kindly. Constellation says, last thought. No, it's not your last thought, Constellation. You still have plenty more. The creator of the universe can't have books written without contradictions and didn't allow the originals to survive. Plus, the later editions like Mark 16, 9 through 20, not trustworthy. Any thoughts? Gnostic smiling. What you got?
So what he's pointing to is, so Mark is the first gospel ever written, according to most scholars. There are some that think Matthew might be the first, but the consensus is majority is that Mark is the original. For a number of reasons, it seems like Matthew and Luke are borrowing from Mark in certain spots. Yeah. Anyways, 16, 9 through 20 isn't present in any of the earliest manuscripts all the way up until like 400 AD, like the 5th century. So when you start getting the later, the part, and what is 9 through 20? 9 through 20 is literally Jesus' physical resurrection. So Mark ends abruptly with an angel at the tomb telling the women that he does say he is resurrected, but they don't actually see him. You don't actually know where he is. They say, go to this place and you'll find him. And it ends abruptly. So a lot of people have pointed out, that's interesting that the first time the gospel is ever told, they don't have a physical resurrection of Jesus. It's just they're just told that he resurrected. I think that's a really strong point.
Awesome. Any other thoughts to that? All right. Dragon Fist with Big 10 says 90% of discrepancies in the Dead Sea Scrolls are one-letter differences or a different word for and or a. Most of these discrepancies can't even be translated.
What about those
fired.
Other 10%? That's all I have to say.
And that's not what Kip Davis says, and he has a Nobel Prize for translating the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. No, but I'm sure that you can, through certain translations, if you try to match them, it's like, oh, this one said and, because they're different translations, of course. But
he says they're polytheistic.
The 10% discrepancies are pretty key and critical to our conversation.
All
yeah,
right.
he's talking about the discrepancy. Yeah, Kip Davis would say there's like thousands of discrepancies. Some of them are more major than others. Most of them, I admit, are just minor little spelling differences. Most of them.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, Andrew is backstage, or Dragon Fist, so he'll come talk about it. I'm sure some more. And Reap and whatever it is, Andre says, question to Doug. Doug, shots to you. Is the Bible literally 100% true with no exception, not even a slightest flaw? Quick answer.
Which Bible? You know, the original texts are what God wanted written down and what he provided for us. And there's reasons for all of that. I got issues with the King James. I got issues with the NIV, the whatever, stuff like that. I'm not willing to point to any one of the English translations and say that's literally perfect.
Can I
That's
respond
a way
to
to think
that?
about things.
Yeah.
Why would God allow the King James version, which is the most proliferated version, the translation? Why would he allow that to be such a mistranslation? Why would he allow that to be slightly inaccurate? Because you have disagreements with it. Why would?
Well, my disagreements with King James. The King James is almost exactly the Geneva Bible, without the subnotes and footnotes the Geneva Bible put in there about how kings and popes ought not to reign. The King James hated it, and he went back, had his scholars redo it all, which was almost exactly the Geneva Bible, except he made changes himself, like Titus 3:1, where it says, "Be ready to obey, teach them to obey, and be ready for every good work." And he put, "Teach them to obey magistrates and be ready for every good work."
Right, but that couldn't happen before we have record of it occurring.
It's not in any fragment anywhere the word magistrates there. And other places where he inserted his focus was to get people to obey kings, like Romans 13. It's not about civil governments. He said obey civil governments.
I'm just trying to point out that I think it's interesting that you agree that there are people who have motivated changed the Bible, but those people are just not the authors of the Bible. But God, because God wouldn't allow the authors to have miswrite some of the historical evidence, but he would allow a mistranslation. Like, what is the meaningful difference between us?
Here's the fundamental difference between me and all of you guys. Okay. I'm not focused on the dirt, on what's written, on human history, on what people said. I'm focused on the supernatural.
But you are, because you claim that the earth is 6,000 years old. That's a claim to the Bible. That's a claim to the word that says, here's when, you know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't seem like you're interested in the supernatural. It seems like Gibbs is interested in the supernatural. He's like, well, some of this could be metaphor. I don't know. I just know God's real.
The metaphor is not supernatural. Metaphor is linguistic, literal, literary, whatever.
Okay.
I'm not talking about
if
that.
you're going to just call it an occult book, fine.
I'm not calling it that either. What the fuck? I'm saying that God is supernatural. What he does is supernatural. We are not supernatural, and it's really, really hard for us to understand it, and we don't even have language to describe. I don't believe in free will or predestination.
So then why be dogmatic about Christianity at all? If we're just ants, we can't understand what's going on in this universe, then why even have a strong opinion on it,
Did you turn your volume up? You came in like really high on that one.
I don't know why. It's weird.
It was like woo hot.
Oh, I just leaned in.
We're not going to stop having ant brains. We're going to have ant brains, and we're going to understand what ants understand. And we're going to do the very best we can to get our head around things that are bigger than ourselves. As he reveals them to us. And the Bible is part of that, but he can talk to you personally and explain things to you personally. And I know that I'm wrong about a bunch of stuff. And whether I'm right or wrong doesn't change him.
Okay.
Oh, and Ben hurt my feelings.
Oh, Ben, you big meanie.
And I would like to correct him.
You should definitely not have picked that fight with all the times you brought up Odin. I was going to be like real, just
I don't
scholastic about it, but you brought it up too many times.
I don't get to hurt your
boy,
feelings.
when the gauntlet comes out, oh, it's going to hurt.
It'll be fine.
Okay.
All right, let's move forward. Everybody's happy, everybody's healthy, everybody's alive, and we're all here to share our opinions. Coriolis says, good talk, everyone. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so kindly to all the gentlemen who are here and the panelists backstage waiting to come on and shake it up a little. Constellation, I told you it wasn't your last one. Homework assignment, GW170817, creation of heavy elements like gold. There's your homework assignment. Everyone go look that up, whatever it may be. Ben, I think did this come in on your side, Ben?
I don't think
so.
Yeah.
Nice.
The big 200. Man, everybody's getting some love tonight. I love to see this. Keep them rolling, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so very much.
Tat says the Bible was written in code by using stories, metaphors, and parables. All spiritual texts are maps to the truth spoken in different ways. The problem is we focus on the stories and not the teachings. Ooh, that's really good. I like that. Uncle Doug, I think this actually speaks directly to you and kind of your arena. Do you want to elaborate on this one?
I'm not a big fan of all roads lead to the same place, but I understand that almost all of our life is spent here talking to each other, talking about, psychology and sociology and science and all this stuff. And when we have conversations about spiritual things, it's very difficult for us to get our head around. And the main way is by parable. And that's Jesus mostly told stories. The kingdom of God is like this. It's like a coin that a woman lost. It's like a pearl in a field. It's like to try to connect us to something bigger. So I get it. And that's my point too, is that our focus should be on what does this, everybody, I don't have a pet to show. I'm sorry. It's a competition now. Anyway, I think the point should be on what is it we're supposed to learn, and how are we supposed to be different? How are we supposed to be to one another? Oh, here we go. How are we supposed to be to one another? And how fat can we get our animals?
I agree.
Yeah, he had to get his testicles cut off because he was too high testosterone, and we didn't want more puppies, which was the only thing that was going to stop him and make him pee again. And he couldn't pee, so we had to do it. And then he got super fat. And I'm absolutely accepting of what's being said with this. Mm-hmm. If you're saying it's an occult book, it's teaching something, again, life lessons, things like that. But don't then also say it's historical, that Adam and Eve were the first humans, that a flood wiped out the entire earth. If those things are metaphors for you to learn from, I'm down. Fine. But
so is it truth or not?
For them to have actually mapped onto reality, which is what the debate prompt was, absolutely not.
Look, I like a lot of, I'm going to throw something in. I like a lot of Jesus's teachings. I think the Sermon on the Mount is fucking beautiful. I think it's great. And I genuinely, I can't deny, I grew up in a Christian household, or I don't know if you consider Mormons Christians, but I grew up in a Christian household true. I grew up in a household that was very clearly influenced by the Bible. And I think that a lot of my moral systems came from that. And there's a reason why I don't hate religious people. I definitely have a lot of solid feelings about a lot of the teachings that are taught in the Bible. I do draw onus though when we start treating it like it's historical fact. I feel like I'm losing my mind when people say that the earth is 6,000 years old. And you're like, it's actually not 4,000. Like you said, I consider it 6,000. It's like, dude, we have to live on the same reality. And if you just want to have something that you believe in and you're like, look, I think that it's really important to get on my knees every time before I go to bed and pray to something and meditate, all power to you. Genuinely, I really mean no disrespect, but we do have to live in the same reality. And it feels like it's driving our cultures completely apart when we can't even agree on, basic facts. Anyway, continue. That's all.
Real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Take your time on this one.
I don't even blame you if you are really getting visions or whatever. Jesus is visiting you in your dreams and you're having these subjective experiences that are real, then I would be probably the same as you. I don't even know how to combat when people say I had visions of Jesus, the Mother Mary came to me, all this stuff. I just go, I'm not going to say you're lying. I'm just like, that happened to you. Then I get why you're like this. I get why you're fighting this fight. So with that being said, the last thing I wanted to say was I actually do enjoy a lot of the character of Jesus. I don't know if that's really how the historical Jesus was. I think a lot of the stuff is added or attributed to him, but I do like his cynical nature, how he's a no bullshit kind of guy. I love that about Jesus.
It's hard to listen to you when you wave a knife at me.
That's a good point. Sorry.
Boy, that's not a knife. This is a knife. I'm sorry.
Ben was sharpening shears the other night while we're sitting here on the gauntlet, and it was like, what are you doing? What is going on? Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
I got my hunting knife right over here too.
I'm a homesteader and it's shearing season, so
Something to do while you're on panel. Makes sense. Little Wing says, what do ancient cities in South America have to do with the Abrahamic God being real? And I believe that was towards just in terms of comparative stories across the world and how they were being brought down.
Well, just within 500 years, they told this guy was myth because they couldn't find him. And it only took us 500 years. We found it. That's a small time period compared to like the time periods we're talking about with the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Oops. And then Little Wing says Polynesians came from Southeast Asia. If they didn't get story from Christians, they could have learned the story before leaving. Doesn't mean all of the Bible claims are true. Quick thought to this one.
I've heard this before, that a lot of the Polynesians got there after like 1200 AD or something late. So that could be a possibility by that time. If that's true, there could have been myths from the Eastern world that were adopted from the Persians or something that eventually got back to Judea, something like that. It's a possibility. Like nothing's impossible at this point.
Well, that's interesting. I would also argue, though, that we look at this right. We used to have. I just had it at the tip of my tongue. There was a site here in America that we're like nobody was here before 1400 years ago, right? And now they found a site older in South America. Well, if the land bridge theory is true, then how did they get to the site in South America? So, like, I would argue there's probably waves of people that got on boats and probably showed up. I like that's kind of, and this is why I brought up the Moo thing. I know this is going to be a controversial thing too, but like I think we found a subcontinent there that arguably could be Moo. And when I say that, I mean it was just a low-lying area that got flooded during after one of the ice ages. And if there were people living there, well, they had to go somewhere or die. You know, and like so, like I feel like that's kind of where I'm going with that. Like so, I don't know that I would talk about those people be getting it from Christians. Now, anybody after 1200, you know, yeah, I would say they could have had some taint. You know, would be my argument then.
The young Earth argument, since I'm completely outnumbered. The young Earth argument is that there was a water canopy over the whole planet that diffused gamma, X-rays, UV rays, so everything could live longer. That we were in a hyper-oxygenated environment, so everything got bigger. Everything was a vegetarian until the ark, when God said to take the animals for meat. Before that, everybody was just eating the abundance of everything and getting bigger and bigger. Some people talk about Noah being 12, 16 feet tall. Living hundreds of years, whatever, having babies through the whole span of however long, 600-year-old wife. Anyway, the Bible says that water came up from the deep and that came down from above. So if there was a water canopy, so cloud cover so thick you couldn't see the sun, it said that the earth was watered by the mist from the ground, not by rain. God said when it rained, everybody made fun of Noah. They didn't even know what that was. God gave him the rainbow as a confirmation. That was the first time he'd seen it. All you need is direct sunlight and water vapor to see a rainbow. But if you're under a canopy, you don't see rainbows. Okay, so if the water came up from the deep, it was under the tectonic plates, and the water canopy collapsed, then that meant that the earth before the ground was more continuous and there would have been land bridges all over the place. And that it's the water above and the water comes up from beneath, it's going to move things and make mountains and everything else. That's part of the young earth argument, that why everything lives so much longer, because in a barometric chamber in a hyperoxygenated environment, cancer can't survive. If water is insulating you from UV rays and all the stuff that kills us now, everything lives longer. Reptiles never stop growing through their whole life cycle. We don't know what a 600-year-old iguana would look like, or a horned toad. So that's some of the young earth arguments. So there would have been migration easier all over the place pre-flood.
Can I ask you a question? Because just out of curiosity, because I know I'm tentatively on your side on me. Okay, whatever. I got a question of why do canine teeth exist if everything was a vegetarian?
I don't know. Why were there saber-toothed tigers? I don't know. Either they adapted later, or God knew we were going to eat meat eventually. I don't know.
Okay, one more question then. Just out of curiosity, why did God get mad at Cain for being a farmer versus Abel being a rancher, right, and providing a blood sacrifice? Why was that a big issue if killing things wasn't a thing?
Good question.
It's not that killing things wasn't a thing. The Bible says life is in the blood. In the Old Testament, there are grain sacrifices and there are animal sacrifices. I'm not clear what the point was, except that God knows the heart. And the likely answer is that there was something wrong with Cain's heart, that it wasn't it wasn't sacrificial. It wasn't. He didn't really mean it. It was out of obligation. There was something wrong there.
There's always a way, isn't there?
I don't think it had to do with the actual sacrifice.
It actually says in the text that he rejected him because he didn't give his.
Well, that's not literal, Gnostic. Don't you know?
Right. Yeah, don't be quoting Bible now.
A fun.
No, wait, what? I'm not on your side.
Dun, dun, dun.
Fun fact. Some of the one of the Gnostic sects that showed up around the 100 AD to 200 AD region actually thought that because Cain was a tiller of the ground and didn't use animal sacrifice, that he was the good one. So they actually called themselves Cainites, not Canaanites. Cainites, C-A-I-N-ites, Cainites. And they were literally these people who were like Gnostic Christians who believed the Old Testament God was evil because of what he did to Cain. So it's a huge heresy. I'm not saying this is a real.
Well, check this out. You really like this thing. I don't know if you know about parallel universes and all that good jazz, but apparently Command and Conquer is a parallel universe in Cain, and the Cainites are a real thing, and they still believe that, and that's actually the Brotherhood of Nod today. That's a joke if anybody watches plays Command and Conquer.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. Last one I'll read for now. I know there's still a few that came in after we took a pause, but I'll get to those later. Jim says, thank you for hosting this. You are most certainly welcome. And I look forward to having all of these guests back again. It is time to meet our panel, folks. If anybody does need to get up and step away for a second, please feel free to do so at this time. And we have plenty of
reinforcements coming, Doug.
We got reinforcements coming for all of you. I'm seeing everyone backstage, and I know how this is going to go. So, gentlemen, are you ready to meet your panelists? Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know my camera is stalling out again. I do apologize if I have any visual lag, but I believe my voice is coming through crisp and clear. That means all of you can hear my voice. So if you hear my voice talking, that means you should stop. The reason why I played this game of if Sarah talks, nobody else does is because the only time I typically talk is to get order on the panel and to try to get one at a time so that we can hear the rest of you. Otherwise, I will stay out of the fight. All right, this is open panel Q&A portion, which means we are going to play a little game of round robin and go one at a time. And that means everybody else on the bottom row, except for Hunter, sorry, you're down there, will mute up. You will not be talking while I go one at a time. To the panelists who just joined, you get the opportunity to ask any one of the men up top a question, have a little back and forth, and then we'll move on to the next person. Please don't anyone else interrupt on their time. All right, Andrew, I'm going to hand it to you first. Your question, everybody else on the bottom row, except for Hunter, will be muting up. Thank you. Go ahead, Andrew.
Hey, how's it going? Gnostic Informant, my question is for you. And I do appreciate you being here. I'm a fan of your channel. I've been watching it for a long time, so I'm not trying to be hostile here. Myth Vision as well. I watch both of those channels, your channel and his regularly, so I'm a fan. I did send that super chat. I did have a question about what you said about the Dead Sea Scrolls, because you kind of made it a point to say, like, there's thousands of errors. And then I asked, it seems like you agreed with me that most of those errors, I'm not saying there's not thousands. I'm saying that most of them are small textual errors that can't even be translated. You do agree with that, right?
Yeah, most of them. Yeah, there are some major, I made a post about this recently. There are some major theological changes not anything that's going to really like change Jewish theology or anything like that. But it's not like some sort of miraculous, perfect, copying going on. There's a lot of changes, is what I'm saying.
No, okay, and that was my next question: is can you point to any change that like actually makes a specific difference to the doctrine, particularly Christianity in the New Covenant?
Yeah,
what would change that?
Hold on, I made a post about this recently, so let me just go to my if you give me a second, I can look up my post.
Sure.
Isaiah, hold on, it'll take me 2 seconds, literally.
No problem.
Here we go. So Isaiah, let's see, where is it? I think this is it right here. Isaiah scroll. Let me do Isaiah's scroll. So, okay, so for example, the Isaiah 14:4 in the Great Isaiah Scroll says, how has this is the one from the Dead Sea Scrolls, how has the oppressor seized, the insolent raging one seized? And then the Leningrad Codex, which is the 1000 CE, the oldest one before we found it, says, how has the oppressor seized, the golden city seized? So there's like there's the passage being changed from a golden city to insolent people being one seized. So the major significant change is the city and the people. Another one is in the Leningrad Codex, it says, this is Isaiah 45:2, I will go before you and make the crooked places straight. And then in the Great Isaiah Scroll, it says, I will go before you and level the mountains. So now all of a sudden, we're not even talking about crooked people anymore. We're talking about a geographical place being leveled. So those are pretty major. And like I said, this isn't something that's going to change Judaism or anything. But like that is not the same text anymore. That is a different passage that is relaying two different things happening there.
Yeah. So again, that's my point, is that these aren't, you may take it that way. To me, it seems minor. And that's the impression, honestly, that I get most of the time when you make your case on your channel, when you go on Myth Vision, is like, I get what you're saying and what you're saying might be true. But for me, it's like, I don't see why that disproves.
It's not, I'm not saying it disproves. Well, that alone doesn't disprove the Bible. My reasons for disproving Isaiah would go way beyond that. It would go beyond like the textual criticism just about the text itself, not about the two variants of the text. But it's fair. What you're saying is fair. It's not major. Like, it's not like the only thing that's changing is in one text, it's about people, and another text is about land, and another text is about a city, and another text is about insolent people. So it just changes the subject of the text. It's not major. I'm not saying it's major. I never said that either.
But when you first made the claim, you're like, oh, there's thousands. So you were being a little bit, I know it's a debate tactic, but you were implying by saying there's thousands of discrepancies that this is like a major deal. And I think you kind of did the same thing to Gibbs when you were like just dismissing all his, he was bringing up flood myths from all over the world, some of which are in the stuff that you cited. I believe there's flood myths in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Enuma Elish.
Yes,
so I don't know why you're pretending like there isn't when you're arguing with him.
No. The Epic of Gilgamesh is in Mesopotamia. It's in the same general region, same cultural, even same linguistic family. It's an Akkadian. Hebrew is also a Semitic language, so is Akkadian. They're from a common tradition. You're gonna have like the ancient Greek stories have a lot of overlap with what you find in Minoan myths and Mycenaean myths. It's the same thing you find with Mesopotamia and in the Hebrew Bible.
No,
so I'm not denying that Epic of Gilgamesh with the dove and the raven being let off. Yes, there's a literary dependence from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Hebrew Bible.
Okay, I just thought it was a little bit ironic that it was in your own sources that you were citing while you were arguing with him that that there was no connection, there was no dove. So I was waiting to.
No. I said there's no dove and raven in the ones that are in like North America and stuff like that aren't before modern time.
Fair enough. I'll let everyone else go, and then I brought some evidence, so I hope we have a chance to go over that evidence.
Let's do it.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. Santa, I'm so glad you made it. Thank you, Neil. I'm so glad you made it to the show. I was really anticipating you getting on this panel. Your question, please.
Why does the Bible have to be precise when the prompt says, and I will quote, The Bible is fabricated history that does not map onto reality, unquote. Now, if I look at this semantically, is another word you've brought up in this conversation so far, that does not leave room outside. All of the Bible is fabricated history, and none of it maps onto reality.
It's not what I said.
Right, I agree. But when other people were talking, that's the standard that they had to overcome. Like, for example, you have these different areas within the Canaanite regions. You have these different mythos. You have these different stories that are going around. But when Uncle Doug was bringing up different citations from different areas with spelling errors, with other illusions, you were unwilling to consider that. Now the prompt.
Which example are you talking?
What's that, Gnostic?
Can you give me an example? Not to cut you off, but I just want to be on the same page as you. What do you mean by that?
Well, no. My memory got distracted by Goslings jumping out. I apologize.
He did bring up like the thing that turned white, and then
there's a spelling in Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
When you said spelling of Nebuchadnezzar, I said that's a fair point. I never denied the spelling of Nebuchadnezzar is a big deal.
Well, we didn't stick to. We never really. I think we all agreed the actual statement that he's quoting of the show, which was an absolute, nobody disproved, because if none of it tracks reality and all of it's fabricated, none of us made that point. So
is the entire Bible all fabricated history? No, I don't think so at all. Maybe the title is misleading in that sense, but I do think the majority of it is, and I think the authorship is later than the proposed authorship. I think I'm talking centuries later, later.
I watched your channel with Andrew apparently for years, and Myth Vision and all that. I follow you guys a lot, but it just strikes me that the prompt here, the Bible is fabricated history, that doesn't leave out, or that doesn't leave room, for the statement you just made.
Which one is that? That some of it does map on?
Yeah.
No, that's fair. I think most of it is. Yeah, that's fair.
But
yeah, for example, I even opened up at this to make sure. I wanted to be clear when I opened up. The kingdom of Israel is a real place. It's not a myth. It's not like Narnia, right? It's not a real. It's a real place. It has real kings. There is some real history. Some people debate about David. There is an inscription that says House of David, so that maybe he did exist. And then the kings after him, Omri, Hezekiah, Josiah. There's very good evidence for all those kings, all of them. Very good evidence. Before that, it gets a little hairy when you start talking about the Torah, talking about Moses, Abraham. It gets a little hairy.
And then I just had a second point. I'm sorry, I have to go help Goslings, but I want to get going here. I heard someone refer to stolen myths, and I would like to say horse pucky. If there's anything that humans do, it's that they borrow myths. They like, hey, that's pretty good story right there. And so I think we need to step away from this. Any group or any age owning a myth or any historicity of any stories that they have, because when they're beheld by a particular group, they can be special, but they can be special to someone else, and they might have real value. Time out for now. We're saving Goslings.
That's a fair point, though. I just want to second that, because there is even some scholarship now pointing out that the Homer's Iliad might even be a mimesis of another Hittite myth that from the Bronze Age. This is what people do. They take stories, they retell them, they personalize them, they pass them down. So there's the idea that like this is a stolen plagiarism thing. I don't use those terms in my channel ever. You'd never see me use those terms. They borrow it, they repurpose it. That's what I say.
Like Star Wars.
Yeah. Star Wars and Dune. Good example. Star Wars and Dune.
And the Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Ah, come on.
That's all I had.
Star Wars and Dune.
Yeah.
Virgin Birth.
Anakin's better than the other fucking
this
one.
This stolen and borrowed concept is like last debate where we're talking about in the Hebrew Bible of if you're allowed to strike or beat a slave. This is it doesn't come from there.
I thought
we went through that one last night.
I thought it was getting them stoned.
That was last night. Yeah, remember? No, it was you're allowed to beat your slave or strike your slave. You're allowed to hit the slave. The point is the getting into the, his claim is fabricated, and fabricated means unoriginal, means created from another source other than a direct experience. That's the argument. Correct, Gnostic, or no?
Say that one more time.
The claim is that the Bible is fabricated, and fabricated means it is copied from another source. It means not an original. For example, if someone wrote a story and said this guy Moses saw a burning bush, or Paul saw Jesus, that's a fabrication. But Peter, let's say that his text is original, then he was there.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of examples of where the history is fabricated by using a retelling of another myth or some sort of mimesis.
Yeah, 100%. That's all we have proof. I stand with that. That's all we actually have proof for, gentlemen. Unfortunately, that's the only proof we have.
I think you are really, really overgeneralizing the Bible to be historical facts about historical people and leaving off letters of advice, poetry, hymn, parable, lots of other stuff that isn't historic, doesn't refer to set people, and is telling the story of the bigger story, teaching. And we can't get
I agree with you. The poetry, the message. Again, anything I'm saying tonight has nothing to do with not thinking that Jesus was a great prophet. I don't believe in human saviors, but if I did, he'd be right up there with Zarathustra. But the point, the debate, from what I understand, is the Bible fabricated? And whether we're talking about the New Testament, the Old Testament, I just don't see there's an argument against it. I mean, Uncle Doug, no disrespect to your belief or your faith, but you're talking about Noah's flood. The only one question I have regarding Noah's flood is how do you re-separate or reconstitute in its wholeness salt and water? How do you explain that one?
I didn't understand you. It bleeped.
If Noah's flood, as you describe it, is historically accurate, there's a great flood and then all of a sudden everything's separated and everything that exists was put onto this magical boat, then how do you separate the waters of fresh water and the animals that live in fresh water and then the animals that live in salt water? How did it reconstitute in what we see today?
Everything was fresh water. Everything was fresh water until after the flood, and we know that the oceans are getting more and more saline.
Well, there we go. I guess
So
did the whales die?
No, they adapt. The whales didn't need to be on the ark. The whales were in the water.
No, but it's fresh water, right?
What about the saltwater ones?
I think you would say it was salt water. It would have to be salt water, Uncle Doug. It wouldn't have to be, couldn't be fresh water. It would have to be salt water that eventually became fresh water through rivers. Right. I think that's what you're trying to, right? That's what you're saying?
What comes out of the sky is fresh water.
Wait, so then how did the whales live?
So how were there?
They're like bull sharks. They evolved to be able to do both. And then
so then all the saltwater animals that we saw at the time of the dinosaurs, that's
I got you, Hunter.
Satan's trick. That's Satan's trick, Admiral Gibbs. We'll put that in with the dinosaurs, right?
Hey, listen, maybe maybe the dinosaurs had cell phones. We don't know.
Though it says that the waters, that it rained and water came up from the deep. We don't know the water that's coming up from the deep, how much mineral content it has.
You're right. We don't. That's true. But what we do, so we do know that we have a Hebrew Bible. We do know we have a New Testament. We do know we have a Dead Sea Scroll. Do you accept the Dead Sea Scrolls, or do you think it's some other fabrication? You accept that? Put any weight in that?
They definitely exist.
Okay. And are you familiar with the Ugaritic text?
No.
Okay. Well, in the Ugaritic text, I mean, they're carbon dated between 1200 and 1500 BC. Ugaritic is another Semitic language, as Gnostic was referring to, in the modern day Syria. And if you go and look at that, two things happen. One thing is that it corroborates a lot of the Old Testament stories, especially Genesis. The
Leviathan stories in there.
Which puts it into question.
That could be a myth that it justifies, but specifically about Elohim in the form of 70 Elohim for 70 peoples and 70 pieces of land, right? For example. So it does corroborate that. But it also goes against a lot of the other narrative, for example, of the concept of Yahweh being the one God and the Elohim being some sort of subordinate thing similar to God and angels. They were all Elohim, and there were various Elohims equally worshipped. And specifically, there were Elohim for different parcels of areas, Baal being the main Elohim of the land that we call Israel today, and Dagon being in Tyre. So if you take all of these in historical, and again, this is, I love all this stuff, but if you take the Old Testament, then you take the Masoretic version, we can throw out the Masoretic, because that's what Jesus was. If anyone here likes Jesus, you can't accept the Masoretic text, because those rabbis that he was preaching against and battling against is the shit we see today, right? The rabbinical interpretation is why you have 10,000 pages in a Talmud, right? So let's leave out the Masoretic text. Let's go traditional Hebrew Bible. You have very, very serious differences in there. So Yahweh was considered a lesser Elohim, an Elohim that was given to peoples without a land. That's what the Ugaritic texts say. And it's carbon dated to the time of which Moses was said to have existed, which is 500 years before David, which we have no records of, because no one wrote about this guy. I mean, Gnostic has hours on this. I'm just going on a quick overview here. Balderson, is on the same thing, and I feel like we have a lot of
appears in 300 BC in history out of nowhere. Boom.
Well, here's the best part about Moses. This is what bothers me. And by the way, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. What bothers me is Shabbat Shalom. What bothers me is when something is like a manipulation. For example, that's what bothers me. Like, for example, Moses was freed. He didn't know he was Hebrew. He didn't speak Hebrew. He was raised by the Egyptians. He killed the one guard. He fled. He met his future wife. The father was a priest. And by the way, this is a great place, and it's very serious, powerful. They're in Moab, right? Or Midia, sorry. Midia is modern day Jordan. So if you go to Jordan, there's Wadi Rum, which means Valley of High Places. The name for God is El. They all worshipped one God called El, right? So El was the supreme creator. El is what you think Yahweh is, or Jesus. And then there was a break in the firmament, and the El Elyon opened the firmament, and the Elohim came through. That's why all the Elohim have different names. And the archangels have Mikael, Uriel. They're El, which is the eternal, with an aspect attached to it, right? And these Elohim dispersed and had different beings. Now, whether they created each different being or just managed or ruled over them, like the Anunnaki, is the same thing. But what we do know is that you have the Wadi Rum, Valley of High Places, and the Wadi Musa, which is in Midia, what Gnostic mentioned. And there he went up. I think the priest said, "Here, drink this. Go up to the mountain. See you in the morning, pup." And sent him up, and he had a vision about a burning bush. In Arabic, another Semitic language, there's a terminology called the jinn. And the jinn is a being of smoke or fire. That's where the word genie comes from. So when you understand the tale of the genie and the lamp telling you things, now you understand every single one of these prophets and messengers in the Arabian desert, seeing spirits coming out of mountains, talking in fires. I mean, personally, for me, I've drank ayahuasca 6 different times in the Wadi Musa, the Valley of Moses, and I saw I understand how you can see some shit. It's phenomenal. And I've been in ayahuasca 12 years. I went there for 6 days by myself, and I'm telling you, I understand. I saw Hebrews forming out of the light as the sun rose upon the lands. So I get the idea, but I'm not going to say that I saw God in the bush or anything else. But if it was my first experience, perhaps I think if I'm Paul walking through and I see I take some stuff because I guess I'm rambling off here unless someone wants to interrupt. But the point is that I don't understand why, for example, let me break it down. One last sentence. When Abraham spoke to, when it's Avram, and he spoke to, in Genesis 12:3, Genesis 12:3, when Avram speaks to El Shaddai and becomes Abraham, right? And Abraham means the father of nations. God says, "I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and your seeds, you will be the father of great nations through your seeds," right? And that's where the patriarchal lineage comes through, right? But then later Moses, who doesn't know anything about Hebrew, doesn't know anything about Semitic lands or Israel promises or Abraham, none of that shit. He goes from Egypt, he flees, then all of a sudden he sees a spirit emerge from the bush. He says, I am the father, I am the God of your forefather Abraham. Moses would say, who the fuck is Abraham? And what language are you talking to Moses in, right? But let's leave that alone for a second. Let's say it was explained and he understood. And he says, I told Abraham and all those Hebrew people who probably don't even speak the language still because they've been enslaved allegedly for 400 years. I told them that my name is El Shaddai, including the patriarch of the whole thing. But I didn't actually tell them the truth. In fact, my name now is Yahweh. And when you look at the Ugaritic text, you see both of these Elohims existed. So they're two different Elohim.
My turn.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll wrap this thought up with Shaman, and then we'll move on.
No. I'm just, and I hope you understand, guys. I in no way, please. I'm not in any way hating on your faith or Jesus or Muhammad I'm talking about the betas.
You're supporting the synchronicity happening at some point around the late Bronze Age. Is that what you're saying for Yahweh?
I'm saying we need to look at all the text and all the information and then form our own educated opinions. That's all.
You're either opening the door to the reality of the supernatural or just encouraging drug use. I'm not sure which or both. But for the record,
supernatural, my friend.
Okay.
Supernatural.
That's different than the conversation we had with everybody before. For the record, whatever experiences I've had, I was dead, cold, sober, never done a drug in my life. But personally, I deal with a lot of folks. I've never met anybody that did meth that didn't believe demons were real.
I believe demons are real.
Yeah. And I think demons are what was called jinns in the day.
Socrates and a lot of the Greek philosophers that studied the mystery schools, they would light two candles to the left and right of them, and they would stare up at the ceiling and speak to the daimon, which is also a jinn, which are good jinn and bad jinn. There are good angels and bad angels. The angels that fell from heaven are still angels.
Okay, now I get that. And Baal, Molech, all of them angels that were asking people to throw their babies into the fire and have fertility rituals and all this other stuff are not the good guys.
Agreed.
And you mentioned earlier on about a people without a land, and they certainly were. And he had them wander around and get tougher and tougher until he gave them a land. But
no, they wandered around by their own faults. They wandered around because of their lack of faith and trust in God. That's why Israel means that those who struggle with God.
I know that they weren't lost in the desert. He was leading them because they chickened out on the 9th of Av.
And then the question is, where are the bones of 2 million people that lived in the desert and had to die in the desert? The first generation had to die, including Moses, because he struck he got pissed off because they're like, Moses, day after day after day. Imagine 600,000 Jewish people up your ass every fucking minute, right? Yeah. And he goes, must I do everything? And he struck right, as opposed to we, and then he wasn't allowed to enter the promised land. So he had 40 years to sit there and write it all out.
Yeah, because prophetically, Yeshua had to take him into the promised land. It had to be Joshua. So God lifted his hand.
Joshua or Yeshua and Jesus, you mean? Isa.
Joshua is Yeshua.
Okay. Okay. That I understand your theology. I got it.
Just like in Ezra, it refers to the high priest Yeshua. Anyway, a different Joshua. But that's
Can you tell me where in the Old Testament any variation of it the word Messiah comes from? Where did Moses write Messiah anywhere? Just curious.
I don't know.
It's not there. Well, the answer is it's not there.
What's the difference?
What's the difference of there's being no Messiah written by Moses?
Okay.
It's a very big, you're saying that's not important?
No, how about
or is it just new?
Where did Jeremiah talk about Messiah? Where, you can't just pick a Bible character and say because he didn't talk about Messiah, then Messiah is not real.
Well, Jesus does claim that Moses wrote about him. He does say that throughout the text.
But my point is, okay. Messiah can come later by different prophets. Got it. But my point is that if Moses is the patriarch, and Moses had a direct connection with God, Moses was led out in Exodus, and he was guided the whole way, correct? Moses was one of the few people that everyone says did not have an angel speaking. He had no arbitrator between. He spoke direct to God, correct?
Okay, seems to be that way.
That's what we're told, right? So let's grant that. So he had 40 years, and in those 40 years where he wasn't allowed to enter, he wrote 5 books, 3 of which are law with 613 mitzvot, and 2 books of everything else. And nowhere in there did he talk about a future savior. So God didn't reveal that to him?
Okay. A, I think Abraham's the patriarch, and B, God spoke directly to Abraham.
No, Abraham's the patriarch of many things. Abraham had Ishmael, then he had Isaac, and then allegedly he had a third wife, which Keturah, and had 6 other sons. So all of them are his seeds equally, in my viewpoint. I don't think that anyone's not his seed just because everyone likes to grab one of them. Okay. So what I'm saying is that the concept, if we're going literal, the concept of Messiah, of which the prophets that talked about Messiah pointed to only one verse, Genesis 49:10, talking about the scepter shall not depart from Judah until the ruler's staff will be between his feet until Shiloh comes. And all you need to know is a little bit of history of where the first temple and second temple were. And all that's talking about is the return of the first temple to the first location, from between northern and southern, from Israel and Judea. Had nothing to do with the Savior. And that verse is where the later prophets, which were trying to kiss David's ass and trying to become special Pharisees, the higher priests, started to talk about that.
Well, I think all of the Old Testament speaks about Jesus in some way or another. Some of it so deep we can't understand. There, the names of the first 7 people in the genealogy of Adam talk about that one's coming to take on the sins of the world and die.
Chuck
Chuck
that's been debunked, by the way.
You said Chuck Norris? Chuck Norris?
Yeah,
Chuck Missler had this theory that the names of all the first people in the Genesis are pointing to Jesus, and then other scholars have come around and said, no, they don't actually mean that.
Well, you should have said Chuck Norris. That's a strong argument. Because he's in heaven now. Hey, Chuck Norris is in heaven now. No, because he was a real Christian. He was a proper guy. Anyway,
breaks out.
Uncle Doug, the thing is that what you just said actually it pans out if you actually accept all the actual prophets, because 7 down from Adam is Enoch, and Enoch took the sins of the world according to the book of Enoch when he faced the Watchers. Did he not? He took the sins of the world and he faced the Watchers according to the book of Enoch.
He took the sins of the Elohim. It wasn't the sins of the world; it was the sins of the fallen.
Did he or did he not defeat the Elohim and then rise unmolested without death to go to the throne of God according to the book of Enoch?
To the right hand of God.
To the right hand.
It says he was taken up. I don't know about defeating the Elohim. They just,
no, not Elohim. The fallen, the Watchers, the fallen Elohim, not all Elohim.
Fight.
You're getting too deep, Sarah.
Well, I wanted to at least give True God his opportunity at his question, and then we will go ahead and move into open floor. And I do have a bunch more people hanging out backstage that do want to have their opportunity to make their way up here. The only way they can do that is when we move to open floor, and if people get booted or people leave.
I'm sorry. I thought this was open. I'm so sorry. I really thought that was. I just got on right now. I thought.
No, that was your turn. You used a lot of time, but I wasn't gonna I didn't want to shut it down completely because it was a good banter, right? And it was a healthy one. But I do also want to give True God his turn. So True God, your question to any of the panelists.
Hi guys.
Hi.
I am the God, the Godfather, the Son, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. It's the fact. I am the God. But I answer the
Amazing. Nice to meet you, sir.
Okay. I am human like you, and I am the God. Not more, not less. I am the human.
Prove it. Do a miracle.
How dare you, Gnostic? That's blasphemy.
Yes. I'm not
do you have a question built into other than claiming that you're God?
Question. Okay, the question. The Bible is fabricated history that does not map it on the reality. I agree. The Bible is a fantasy book. God, I am not in the Bible. The God is not the Bible.
God is not in the Bible.
No.
What?
Jesus would be on
No,
our
because
side.
he's not in the Bible.
It's a long story. But I'm not the Bible. When I was Jesus, I am a slayer, and I Egypt. I'm not is Jews, Judeo. I'm Brazil. I'm from Brazil. I don't speak English fluently, but I can speak English fluent. Okay, if I don't, when I say Judeu, somewhere, I'm not Judeu in Portuguese. I'm not. I am Jesus, but I am Slayer. When I hear, actually, I'm not powers. I am like you. I am human. I don't.
I want to ask it one more time. What is the question to the panel? Aside from you claiming that you are God, what is the question to the panel?
What's the question? I don't understand.
God doesn't have questions.
Because I don't.
I'm going to call Steve Rogers. I listen. There's a lot of gods in this world, and I know they don't.
Can I ask God a question?
Here's why I say this, Mr. True God. I have 4 other people backstage who actually have legitimate questions, and they're not going to troll, and they actually want to be a part of this discussion.
But they're not trolling, Sarah.
I get that, but what I'm saying
not trolling.
is, ask the fucking question, please. You've already said you're God 10 times. We get it. Get to the question.
Damn.
The question, yes, the question is: the Bible is fabricated history that not map it on the reality. Yes, I agree. I agree with this question.
Okay.
The Bible is an illusion.
We win. You got God's approval. We win.
We won. Who won? Yeah. Oh, we won. Yeah, we won. Or you won.
Captain America is not approved. Captain America
I just have a question, True God. And when you were speaking to Hosea and you made it real clear that God is not a man, were you lying to him, or you were just telling him at the real time, at the moment, you were not speaking as a man? And I'm really curious about the burning bush. Why did you choose a bush?
Why Jesus?
Yeah, and yes, but the bush.
That
wasn't you.
No, not me. I'm not.
So Hosea 11:9 is bullshit. He just told you, Uncle Thought.
I like to say the truth. Satan writes the Bible. Jehovah is the Satan. I'm not Jehovah. I'm the God, but I'm not the Bible. It's the truth.
I have an argument to support what True God just said. Quite frankly, it's called history.
All right. We're officially opening the floor, full mic, full everything. I do have waiting backstage. I've got God's favorite aunt, Clay. Effigy was back there. I don't know where he went. And Natural Selectionist, welcome back there. As soon as somebody either leaves the panel or gets booted, our chat knows the drill. They can send $10 in to boot anyone off the panel except for our original panelists. So Hunter, Uncle Doug, Gibbs. Oh, somebody. Oh, Santa, how'd you get back there? I don't know how that happened. Hunter, Gibbs, Doug, Gnostic, and Ben are all off limits, but anyone else, you can feel free to boot them backstage. I am going to read a few more super chats just out of respect to those who sent them in. I'm going to start with this one. This came over on your side, Ben. Fourth Wiseman with a big hundo says, here's a positional reference to work from. The words, perceptions, and meanings are interlaid, overlaid, and to guide yourself through it all, schedule yourself into a time period era in mind and feel it. I will reveal what you seek. Any thoughts to that?
Yeah, he's talking about it more of an occult book type where there should be 3 layers of message in any like a good occult book.
Mm-hmm.
You've got you got the exoteric, which is what people build their religions on, and then the hidden meanings that are inside that. But that only comes from studying and putting yourself in certain mindsets.
The Rosicrucian is called like the great work. It's like the inner work. In Islam, that's what a jihad actually means. And by the way, my Christian friends, just to let you know, like everything I'm saying tonight doesn't mean that Jesus is not a Messiah or a Christ, right? Doesn't mean he's not anointed, and nothing has to do with Jesus on this, what I'm talking about. You can believe in Jesus completely and follow my train of thought.
Okay. If you are watching over on the Raging Tomato side, I'm going to shut down that side and send you all over to the Gauntlet. If you already know where you're going, head on over. Otherwise, catch the raid. We'll catch